Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pod Stallions. I am Brian, and with me to my very far left is Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And we're joined this episode by actor, comedian, writer, and host or co-host of the Monster Party podcast, which I recommend you check out, Matt Weinhold. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well.
It's a pleasure to be here. Virtually,
yeah. I often make the joke when I'm on other people's podcasts, you have a lovely home, but...
But I really do have a lovely home.
He does.
Come over. Jason's been.
I can attest. It's an amazing home. He had a nice place before, but the new place is incredible as a house. But then when you get into the inner sanctum, it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, you're a collector as well, right?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And it's like I have a house now and probably more cases and shelves than I ever had before. And I'm already out of room. Like I'm trying to do that thing of like, well, I could fit something in that corner. Yeah. That would work.
Yeah.
Matt,
and
the other thing that's
do
interesting
it until my wife stops me. You know.
Yeah. I've been given a space, a free range space, and that's it. There's no collectibles in the house, and that's a fair arrangement. And
well, my wife, I have to give her a lot of credit because she's also really one of us too.
Oh, cool.
And so she's not necessarily into the collecting the way I am, but she appreciates it. So, and especially since I got glass cases and put them in glass cases, I think, she likes the presentation if it's done nicely.
Yeah, that's kind of the same here, except she doesn't want it in the way our house is laid out. It makes sense, and I'm completely happy with that.
And see, it's funny. I'm single, and I won't allow collectibles in the house.
Oh yeah.
I won't. I absolutely will not. I will not have them in the house. The other thing about Matt that I've always found interesting, and Matt and I go way back to a show that we worked on in the early 2000s. It was a hidden camera show, and I was a producer / I suppose they'd call it director on a lot of the episodes or parts of the episodes, and Matt was a writer, so we've known each other for a long time, and then we sort of reconnected, 5-6 years ago, whatever it was. But he's also one of those guys, and I say this, and there's no way to say this, it's not going to sound kind of hoity-toity or whatever, but Brian, you and I know about a lot of stuff, but Brian, you will go down roads. Like you'll have me for 60-70% of the conversation, and you'll throw a name out or something out that I'm not going to recognize, or I do it occasionally or whatever. And Matt's one of those guys. We spend an awful lot of time together, and most of the time, 90% of the time, we're talking about stuff like geek stuff. And he's one of these guys that just knows about everything. What I mean is he's heard of, like, there's very few things that I think I've thrown to you, Matt, over the years that you were unaware of, or you kind of heard of maybe, but you hadn't seen yet or whatever. But just across the board. And he's one of these people that I would, just like you, Brian, that I would, I will text and go, I'm thinking about watching this movie, but it's, what's the best one to start with or whatever, because you guys know about all this stuff. So he's one of us that has this encyclopedic, memory of all the things he's ever seen, and he digs a lot of stuff.
It's kind of my curse, though, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because the problem, especially when it comes to the collecting thing, because I love everything.
Yep.
And so I like, and I'm envious of people who are like, I'm just into Godzilla, and they got their
hyper-focused collections.
Yeah.
The guy who has like a room full of Superman, or
that's it. That's their thing.
Yeah,
I can't do that.
I have a friend who can cherry pick what he likes. He's got this amazing collection. It's very eclectic. It's very his. It's tidy. But and I know I have another friend who we both said I envy his ability to do that, like to just
Yes.
curate. Like, okay, I only need these Planet of the Apes, but not those, and it's just it's intentionally done. It shows, and it just shows like this amazing willpower. Because I get into something and it just never goes away. I get into every facet of it.
This all
I've gotten
comes
better
back.
at it over the years because now I can do that thing where, like, and this is talk about something that will take up a shelf. Is if you're into something and then so they release a series of something, and so you've got that weird, sick need to complete get all of them in the series, even if you don't necessarily like every one of the characters. And now I'm much better at like, hey, I only need that one and that one.
Right.
And I'm fine.
That's the one thing I'm like with the new stuff. The vintage stuff is a completely different rabbit hole for me. But new stuff, I can get this sort of. I have this personality tendency called. There's a book called The Four Tendencies, and it talks about people's different. And I've qualified under what is called rebel, which isn't really that cool, but it sounds cool.
It does sound cool.
One of the things that I completely identified with, and this is. When they put out a wave of action figures and there's 5 characters you don't like and 1 character you do like, my head it goes like, you're not forcing me to buy those, like I get this like stick up my butt about not being told to do something, and that's the one part where it's actually beneficial in my life.
This reminds me, like, when I'm Comic-Con obviously is not happening this year, but when I'm down there and I'm at the booth where the Biff Bang Pow stuff is, Entertainment Earth and stuff, talking to people about new stuff, or a couple years ago, just the breadth of stuff that we had in the cases, I'd always make the sort of analogy about, like, I want it to be like a mixtape. Like, you could look at our stuff and when you see that we're doing this, then it's like, oh, they're also doing $6 Million Man. You'd be like, oh, that would make sense that the guys that are doing this are going to do.
Yes.
And you're turned on to all these things. And I think there is something to, because both of you, Matt and I have talked about music probably more than Brian and I, but both of you are music guys too, and into bands and into vinyl and also vinyl records, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
Into vinyl and the whole thing of like, I got to get the B side, if that, like now you can just press a button and get everything. But we grew up in that time where you had to go to a record convention to try to find import singles or whatever. And I think there's a connection between, people that with collecting or with like, oh, it's a new version of the movie that's got, another disc of extras that I haven't seen yet or whatever.
That always gets me.
There is a connection there, I think, to the collector thing. Maybe not quite the I got to get them all or I collect them all thing, but the completist sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or I got to get or I have to get the best one.
Or the best one.
I had a figure of this, but they came out with this new one. Hot Toys made this one that's $350, but it's perfect. And you're like, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a thread there. With digging, I think there's a thread with digging music or digging all kinds of bands or artists or whatever, and being into their stuff, and then it lends itself to all the other facets of like pop culture collecting. I think that's kind of a theory that I've always had.
Yeah, no, it's strange where there's areas in my life where I feel like I have it under control, and then something will come out, and then it'll just shatter all my beliefs of who I am. You know I'm talking about, like, for example,
something that you would normally never go near. Suddenly there's a version of it that comes out that you think, you know what, that is pretty cool. Like,
here's the example is that they came out with these. Now, I'm not even a giant fan of this movie, but what I like about this movie is the designs. Like, I love the way everything kind of looks for the most part. Okay. And the film is The Black Hole. Disney.
Oh, do you know who you're talking to in Toronto right now? Do you know this man? Have you met this man? Oh,
he is a giant Black Hole fan.
I love the movie. I won't defend it to someone because I think that there's some valid points for its flawedness.
No, I love it to death.
I like it more now than I did at the time.
Yes,
let's just say.
Sorry, continue, because you're talking to two guys that love the aesthetic as well.
So then that they came out with these Diamond Select figures.
Oh,
and there are two of them. There's one that's Maximilian, the big evil-looking red robot, which even at the time when I saw it in the theater and was disappointed by the film, I loved him. And I loved most of the androids, and I loved just the design sense. The Cygnus is, I think, beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's really beautiful imagery. And then they bring Bob and what's the other guy? I forget. Vincent, right. And they're and this is like, guy? What the fuck is this?
What's
you know, this is like Space Academy but shittier. And so I've had this love-hate thing with it, but then they came out with these figures, and the figures are so good, and they have different heads that you can put on, and weapons, and little special effect things that you can hook onto these robots.
I've got a set behind me. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine right now in front of me. Yeah, they're beautiful.
But here's the thing: is that I don't want Bob and Vincent, but I do want the background diorama piece that with Bob and Vincent. I have to buy both to get the background piece.
Well, you still
million. So what do I don't even know what to do. And these aren't necessarily cheap either. They're like 50, 60 bucks.
No, they were 25 each when I got them.
Well, maybe when you got them.
But
I'm late to the show.
Well, I mean, I think they're still available at retailers. I'm not sure, but the Bob and Vincent are in one set together, and they're only 20. That was only 25 bucks. I remember the set cost me 50.
So you're saying, so Matt, you're saying that even after all this time,
still holding a grudge.
You still can't, you can't, in your mind, you can't go, look, Maximilian's going to look awesome on that shelf on his own. Might be kind of cool to have old Bob and the other guy near him for scale, or just to kind of give the even now you don't want them in the house. You don't want them.
This thing has ruined my week because I had one of them because it was my birthday recently, and I had it in my Amazon gift list, right? I had what I thought was that Diamond Select one. Well, there is a Diamond Select one that's a Walgreens exclusive that doesn't have all the extra stuff in it.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that. I'm just about to buy it, and I'm like, wait a minute, and it's a different one, and I don't even know what that one necessarily is, but I know that I want the
different card back, and I think it has less stuff.
Less stuff, and I think it even looks like it might be a little less detailed. I'm not sure if it's the same size. Is it bigger?
I believe it's the same figure.
I think it's the same figure. They did the same thing with the Tron figures. They put the Tron. Okay. They did Diamond ones and they did Walgreens ones, and then they just reissued these another set of Walgreens ones that have more accessories, and they have an exclusive Jeff Bridges and the red deco and shit like that. So yeah, it's the same figure.
So now I know. Now I know. I want the regular Diamond ones. I don't want the Walgreens ones. But I could afford the ones that were I guess these Diamond ones are now a little harder to find, at least on eBay. You guys got an angle. Hook a brother up, but it has been driving me crazy because I was just trying to figure out what's the difference between the Walgreens one and the other one, and then I've discovered there's the diorama, but you got to buy both. And I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know.
You're gonna have to get it. You're gonna need
my life.
You got to get the diorama. You're gonna need to.
I do have to get the diorama. I do.
Yeah, you're going to need those in your life. It's funny, these figures just came up the other day because I was watching the Disney Plus does this I think it's called prop culture or something. Prop culture,
yeah. And Vincent and Max are shown briefly.
I actually have not seen that yet. I watched the one for Tron, and I watched the one for Roger Rabbit.
It's in the Mary Poppins episode.
Oh, okay. And I forgot how much I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because when that came out and, trying to find the little figures of that and everything.
Oh, yeah, that was tough.
So I rewatched Roger Rabbit and all the making of and stuff. And I thought, well, Diamond's doing this thing now. They started with Tron. Then they did Rocketeer. Then they did Black Hole. Things that, 30-some years later, we're finally getting figures of. And I thought, they should really do that scale of figures for Roger Rabbit, for all the characters from Roger Rabbit, and I would go nuts with those. Maybe with like Benny the Cab, like a build it Benny the Cab with the parts and stuff, because the figures are gorgeous. Like, you're right, I would have been fine with Maximilian on his own, but I did get Bob and Vincent. I haven't opened it yet, but I have an affection.
I now have to do this. I got to figure out a way where it's not going to cost me $120. But I'm now I've decided what to do, but I can't. I was ready to pull the trigger, and now I can't.
You would be surprised the kind of stuff, as you know, I'm sure, on eBay where people are just selling, the leg of a Build-A-Figure or whatever. I bet you could find those backgrounds.
I looked for that. Believe me, I looked for that. I put in everything, black hole diorama piece, and no, not yet at least. Well, maybe some time goes by.
Contrary to popular belief in the listening world right now, this episode is not about the black hole or about trying to select figures, but that doesn't matter because it's about three people coming together in a very weird time, talking about stuff they love, and exploring each other. If you'll forgive the disgusting metaphor. But how this
where it goes? Hey, no pressure.
I've wanted Matt to come on the. I've been on the Monster Party podcast 16 times. Matt, yes,
and really one of our most celebrated guests,
and one of the best ratings that you've ever gotten. I think.
Both episodes. Jesus! Like the letters
doubled the first appearance, and I've wanted to have Matt on for a while. But how this sort of kicked off topic wise was, like I said, we talk about a lot of stuff, and one of the many, many things that Matt and I have in common is Doctor Who. And, I think you have all the Biff Bang Pow stuff, and we've talked about that, and that stuff came about and all this stuff. And he said something the other day to me that I did not know, was that your first experience with Doctor Who, that world at all, was the Peter Cushing movies, were the Peter Cushing movies that were done in 65 and 66. And I don't think I've of all the people I've ever known that are into Doctor Who, I don't think I've ever known someone whose first exposure to it was not the TV series. It's some phase, some incarnation, but was in fact the movies. And I thought, well, that would be an interesting way to kick this off. We all love Doctor Who and stuff, but we've never done anything about the Cushing films. So
it was strange. It was strange because in San Francisco we had this show called Creature Features, and they do all the horror films and science fiction films, and occasionally on rotation these Doctor Who films would show up. And the first time I saw them, I was just mesmerized, not necessarily by Peter Cushing, who is great in everything, by the way, but the Daleks. I fell in love instantly with the Daleks because we've seen all kinds of robots or cyborgs, if you want to be a little bit more precise, but that have that kind of robot sort of voice. But the Daleks would get pissed off and just start ranting with almost this like edge of like a Cockney accent in there, and it was just like, what the fuck is this? And then so I watched the first one, and then I didn't know that there was a follow-up. And the follow-up I think I like even more, which is the Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD.
Yeah, that's the first one I saw.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Is that the first Doctor Who you've ever seen, or the first?
Oh,
Cushing?
No, I grew up on Doctor Who. I grew up on Pertwee. The Daleks were old friends, but I'd always wanted to see those films. I'd read about them, I think, in the Marvel comic that came out around 80, 81.
Okay.
The Tom Baker one, and they mention it in there. And then I think about 2 weeks later, lo and behold, it showed up on Channel 47 one Saturday. And that's the same day I saw Heartbeeps. So it was a real robot day.
and also a very mixed.
Two versions of evil robots.
Yeah. A very mixed. That must have been like an emotional roller coaster for you that day. Not knowing
my dad did not want to go see Heartbeeps. That is for sure.
Well, I'll give him that.
He was right.
He was right.
Sometimes they know.
Sometimes they know.
So wait, so Matt, so you had no idea what, like, obviously you had no inkling of that this was based on a TV show. or for a kid, whatever. How long before when did you discover the TV series, and how did you discover it?
Well, I watched these films again on rotation. They played every 6 months or whatever, and I watched them over and over again, and I loved them. And I didn't even know that there was a TV show until about the 70s, and it started. The Tom Baker stuff started playing on our PBS channel, but I wasn't even really aware of that. It took me, and I think it was an issue of, I can't remember, because each of these magazines did an issue about Doctor Who, but there was a Fangoria one, and then there was a Famous Monsters one. I think it was the Famous Monsters, where I'm looking at this and it says Doctor Who, and they show Tom Baker, and I'm like, who the fuck is this? That's not Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
And there's all these other monsters that I'd never heard of or seen. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then I start reading this, and it's a show that had been going on forever, and that those first two movies that I love so much were really film adaptations of the Hartnell stories.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was floored. And
It's a weird thing that was going on in the UK at the time. If a show got really popular, it wasn't just Doctor Who. I guess it was due to the fact that everything was broadcast in black and white in the 60s and early 70s, that these film companies would make movies. Like, I think the earlier ones would be like the Quatermass. Serials were made into these amazing films.
Right.
Hammer was doing sitcoms as movies.
They did. Didn't they do it on the buses? Yeah,
I remember watching that as a kid and being completely, because I watched On the Buses as a kid, and there's like, they add characters, and there was just tons of nudity in them too. Like, but it was like, why would they make a movie?
Bless UK.
God, no kidding. But you're right. It was I think the scope of it and the color, and that was
the big selling point, right?
The big selling point. Yeah. Well, what I find
in color.
Yeah, that's the exact same reason the Man from U.N.C.L.E. movies got released in Europe, is because most TVs were black and white. And they could turn these into cash by people going to the cinema and seeing, color episodes of Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah,
I think the Saint too. There was one called The Fiction Makers that was maybe it was a film, but I think it was a couple episodes edited together or something where they would do that. First of all, I just picture you, Matt, as a kid getting Famous Monsters and just sitting down to write a letter like, "Dear Famous Monsters, you've gotten this completely wrong. It's actually a set of movies. I don't know what this TV show is that you're referring to."
How dare you make up new characters for the Doctor Who that I've come to know and love?
What's weird to me, and I don't know enough about it, and you guys probably know more, but I always thought that the Cushing, I get the reasoning and who Cushing was and everything, but I mean, they really are. They're elements of the show, but they're also strangely different in really weird ways. The TARDIS is called TARDIS. It's not called the TARDIS. He's not. They don't mention him being like an alien. He's not a time boy.
He's not the Doctor. He's Doctor Who.
He's Doctor Who. Yes, correct.
Barbara and Ian are not teachers that have a platonic friendship. They are, boyfriend girlfriend type thing. There's so all that stuff. But I always thought it had.
And Susan is a child.
Susan is a
little child.
I thought it was. I thought it was something that was like the what's his name? I almost said Kenneth McMillan. Kevin McClory, who co-authored the story of Thunderball with Ian Fleming. And because there was some clause in that contract or something, he was able to retain
Never Say Never Again.
Some bit of control, which became Never Say Never Again. But he was able to use the name James Bond, and I don't think he used. Maybe they used Q, or it might have been Boothroyd. I forget. No, they didn't use Q. It was like Algernon or something. They couldn't call him Q, so he could use the name James Bond, and the basic plot of Thunderball got remade into Never Say Never Again. But there were tons of lawsuits before it, and then tons since, where he or his estate always wanted to somehow recycle the story again.
Make Thunderball 3 times over.
Exactly, to make money. So I kind of thought that because these were both Dalek stories, not just because of the popularity of Daleks, which, people need to it wasn't a worldwide thing like Bond or Batman or Beatles or whatever, but in the UK the Daleks were, the show was big. But the Daleks were mega. So it all makes sense. But I always thought it had something to do with the fact that both of those were connected to Terry Nation. And somehow Nation licensed the stories to, which was essentially Amicus, because it was Sabatsky who wrote the scripts, I think.
It was Aru Productions, but it's definitely like, I don't know if it's like a shell corporation, like Amicus didn't want to put their name on it, or it was a venture with another investor. But yeah, it is Sabatsky.
Because Amicus existed before these adaptations, correct? They'd already been doing stuff before 65?
I believe they had, yes.
So I always thought, Terry Nation, who must have had the single greatest deal in British television history up to that point.
Absolutely.
He somehow was able to retain the friggin' rights on the Daleks as characters and design and everything else. And I always thought that was the thing. But it was licensed through the BBC, right?
For £500.
Yeah,
£500.
That's to me, that's crazy. That's the crazy
3 stories out of that too.
Yeah, and they were going to do the chase.
Yeah,
but that never happened. I don't really think that would have worked.
Well, I don't think they would have been able to pull it off.
No,
because that's one thing we should talk about these movies. They're cheap.
They're cheap, but they were very innovative in what they put on the screen. I really have to hand it to those movies. And when you compare cheap to the production value of an original Doctor Who episode.
Oh no, absolutely.
Thing is going to be better.
They put all their money into the Daleks by the looks of things.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was going to say
smart
when you watch them, and I haven't watched them in a long time. I've got the DVD set that must have come out like in the early 2000s or something.
Yes,
that Dalek Mania, because they've never been released on Blu-ray in the U.S. But when they finally show up in the first movie, you can kind of get that tiny shiver down your back of like imagining being like a kid in the theater in 1965, looking at you'd only seen black and white, you'd only seen these Daleks, tiny on your TV screen, and when they show up. They really I love that
they're posing
design that they did with the bumpers and the.
Oh yeah, I love it too.
Oh my god,
they look great, and also the thing about the Daleks. Now you just described what a kid maybe in England or someone who had been familiar with the show, how they would react to seeing those color Daleks. Imagine me sitting in front of our first color TV set. Seeing Daleks for the first time.
Right.
Like, I don't even know what this is.
Right.
It has Daleks in the title. I don't know what that is. And there's good old Peter Cushing, who I've come to trust. Yeah. And he takes me into the future, and then there's the crazy weird city, and everything's beautiful and colorful. And then the fucking Daleks show up, and it exterminate, and like, what? Yeah. You can't say that. Robots can't say exterminate.
See, and that's what's interesting, though, is your perspective, because most people that I talk to that discovered Doctor Who in the late 70s or whatever, that, are like Tom Baker kids or whatever you want to call it. Brian's different because Brian, in Canada saw Pertwee stuff before Baker. So when that change happened, he was like, what's going on? What happened to the guy I like?
Yeah, I can see that. I love Pertwee, by the way.
We had the Baker stuff, and we were, this is me. I was thinking more in terms of the aesthetic of the show and the fact that it was on videotape and the character himself, and if this was at first, when the first time you see it, you're thinking, is this like a continual thing, or is it each story is whatever? And the Daleks show up in Genesis of the Daleks, and I think that might have been the second. I think the first story that I saw was actually Arkansas. Like, I must have gotten in ground level in 78 when they started showing these. I don't think I saw Robot, if you will, when it first aired. But Ark in Space, I think, and maybe caught like half of that. And then, so my first real complete story was Genesis of the Daleks. And Davros really did my head in. Like, what the,
Well, okay, but imagine then going from Doctor Who and the Daleks, those films with Peter Cushing as kind of a nutty professor. He's pretty harmless. He's certainly not irascible like William Hartnell was.
No, yeah, exactly.
But and then the next somebody said, "Oh, well, I think I've got some videotapes or something. I forget where I saw it, but they recommended Genesis of the Daleks, and that was the first TV show episode that I ever saw." Oh, and so imagine going from those films, and then, as you described, seeing Davros. Oh my God! And then that was it. I was hooked.
It was that thing of like, what is this? Why is it on videotape? But it had a tone to it. We from the sounds of it, we were exposed to the TV thing at the same time, where it was this very dark period. It was gothic, and it was very Hammer.
Philip Hinchcliffe, right?
Philip Hinchcliffe, and I think he took it, as far as they could with some of the strangeness and violence and darkness and everything. But what's interesting hearing you talk about the movie is that, I'm reversing it with the black and white and the kids in the 60s, whatever, and then all of a sudden, here are the Daleks on a massive screen, painted in color, in blue and red and black. The eyes are lighting, the things are lighting up red on their face. The eye stalk is moving. Like, it must have been holy shit. I mean, because that first movie I think did really well.
Yes, it did.
But so when you finally saw Genesis, were you so you read about it and understood there was a TV show coming, and then you saw Genesis of the Daleks?
Well, yeah. And what was really special about that screening that I had was discovering both new Dalek characters, new Daleks, and Tom Baker.
Right.
So it's like falling in love 3 different times. I mean, I didn't know, like, people always tell you stories about who they would want to hang out with, have dinner with.
Yeah.
Tom Baker's at the top of the list.
Oh, I'm right with you. I'd be there with you.
I would love to just sit and chat with Tom Baker. And as much as I love Pertwee, by the way, because I really do, and I thought he was an excellent doctor, just a very different flavor.
Yeah.
But Tom Baker as someone just to sit there and tell you stories, and every interview I've ever seen has just been a delight. Oh. And especially those audio commentary that you get on the DVDs.
Oh, yeah.
He's hilarious.
Yeah.
Just great. And so here's my introduction to Tom Baker. I've got Davros. And then Sarah Jane. I forgot. There's one more flavor there.
Oh, God.
Growl.
Just perfect. She was so perfect in every way.
I never had a crush on her, though. I just always, really liked her as, a big sister character.
I had a crush on her more like a babysitter. Like, she would be the cool babysitter to hang out with. I didn't quite feel about her the way I felt about other pop culture women and stuff. But
it's a different vibe than Emma Peel, I grant you.
Yes. Even that footage of him, there's making of stuff from a British TV show where they're making Revenge of the Cybermen. And I think it might have been the first or the second on-camera interview with Baker. And even then, his shows haven't even aired yet by the time they're doing this interview. And even then, he has got a vibe to him. He's not doing it by the numbers. I remember in that interview, he describes Pertwee as, he describes his previous incarnations, and, Hartnell being kind of cranky, and then Troughton being a bit of a clown. And then Pertwee, he said, Pertwee was very bright. Like, he'd come into a room, he was a bit like a light bulb, wasn't he? And he does this thing with his hand, the way he describes Pertwee's, head, he really did come into a room and light it up, sort of. But he said he was like a light bulb, wasn't he? And you're like, who would ever describe, what a strange way to describe.
Yeah.
But it's so fucking Tom Baker. It's exactly, he's on planet, Tom Baker, basically. But let's back up a second. So, Brian, because I know you've told me this before, but what happened? How did you see Baker? How did you see Pertwee go into Baker? Was it an hour? I mean, a year late? Or was it right at the same time?
I'm trying to piece together. These are really sketchy childhood memories, but I think the first Doctor Who I saw was either the Three Doctors. I think that's the first episode they played in Canada, or it was
wow.
Yeah, which must have just been what is
what
this?
Stuff.
Yeah.
But then
that's kind of hard to figure out. For being your first episode of Doctor Who, could be a little confusing.
Yeah, but I don't seem to remember that as strongly as I do remember watching the end of Day of the Daleks, last episode, and I think I was into that because A, Daleks, and B, Planet of the Apes, which I was obsessed with, and the Ogrons were apes.
Still loved them though.
Oh yeah, no, I still love them. So that was kind of but I remember I was afraid of Doctor Who. I was afraid to watch it. I was 5.
As you should be.
And so I can remember honestly watching it with my dad, and my parents were like living with the Mystery Science Theater. They nothing was sacrosanct to them. They made fun of everything. There was a running commentary all through my life, I just remember my mom ironing while I was watching The $6 Million Man, and she was just making fun of that rock looks heavy, She was, that was just who I lived with.
She sounds great.
We get along. I talked to her today. But I can remember watching Planet of the Spiders, and the Doctor dies,
oh, yeah.
Right? And I'm like 5, maybe I'm 6 years old, and I'm just like, what is happening? And I was like mesmerized, and the music came up, and my dad started going, ooh, and I was like, don't make fun of Doctor Who. I was afraid if my dad made fun of Doctor Who that something was going to happen to him. I remember that feeling. We've discussed this on the show, and the consensus is I wasn't the brightest kid in the world.
Or maybe too bright.
We'll have to tell Matt what you thought Star Trek was.
Star Trek was happening now, and it was a secret. I thought it was a secret. But to my defense, I had seen like the episode. I think the Gary 7 episode as a kid.
Oh yeah, right.
And
sure.
They're just sort of like in the 60s, and it's not really that
He thought it was news footage.
And they're being sneaky, and I kind of thought, okay, so Star Trek happens now. Whatever. I'm a kid.
That's awesome.
I love it.
I also pointed out today that the Saint. I was just talking about Return of the Saint in the Pod Stallions Facebook group, and how I thought that Roger Moore turned into that cartoon Saint at some point. That's what I thought the show was, and watched 2 episodes to discover that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
again,
on a related note, once my
decided a letter to ITC. Dear ITC, I've watched 2 episodes of The Saints, and Roger Moore.
When is he going to get animated? I remember once. Well, okay, now you're a kid, so you're still working stuff out. I get it. But I remember one time my brother, we're watching Creature Features. My brother was always fucking with me in some way or another.
Oh, yeah. Older brother?
Yes, of course. 7 years old.
My sister's 5 years older than me, and she screwed with me plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're like their little – it's like you're a little test subject for them,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I was waiting for Creature Features – and little did I know that Creature Features had been preempted by a special showing of The Music Man. Okay? So my brother tells me, oh, no, this is really a ghost story.
That sounds like Count Floyd.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And so I'm sitting there watching the entire Music Man, waiting for the ghosts. And then there's like one little scene that there's a special effects little moment where he's imagining he's having a fantasy or something, and then he goes, "See, there are the ghosts," and I'm like, "What?" And so I sat through the entire Music Man, thinking it was a horror movie. I'm still angry.
It is for a lot of people. It is a horror movie.
Well, it's always been for me. Now,
you got some trouble in River City, did you?
Yeah, I just like, and to this day, I can't. If that movie is on, or I know that it's coming on, it's like, nope, change the channel.
That's fantastic.
Now that's
There's
happened to me as a kid because the TV guide would misprint it. You know, they'd say something was coming on.
Yes.
And you're watching The Sound of Music, going, I don't think this is Planet of the Apes.
I forgot that they would sometimes misprint.
You're right.
You'd be watching what you thought was a TV movie about whatever, and it's like, when is this going to kick off? Because nothing's
when is Batman
happening.
going to arrive?
It reminds me. John Cleese told a story once about when Python was airing in the early '70s, and he said that somebody told him the story where like the viewing public, the fans of the show because it was huge when it aired, like 12 million viewers I think at the time, and people started to get used to their rhythm of false starts and false stops halfway through the show and stuff, and that somebody when like the time was wrong in the radio times or something, and they turned it on and they're like, here we go, this is getting, and they had like it was like a newsreader telling some story, and then they threw to a remote or something, and they said that he told Cleese that like he watched for about 10 minutes thinking, well, when are the Python guys going to come in? And then he realized he was watching the news. He was actually watching a news program, which I think is freaking brilliant because
that's great. So anytime anyone said it's, they're like, oh, it's starting.
It's starting. There's 5 minutes left. So Planet of the Spiders. So you did so he dies.
Yeah, and then I think they went into reruns, and it was I was probably like 8 or 9 when they aired Robot. I remember watching it with my sister because we were like, oh, new Doctor Who, the new Doctor, and not that we didn't realize the show was like probably 4 or 5 years old at the time, and.
But he took some getting used to for you, didn't he? Like
it was watching it with my older sister and her best friend, and we were kind of making fun of it because it was, Doctor Who was this tough guy. He was a secret agent type. He had flashy cars and he
was James Bond,
kung fu, and he was a hero of mine. And now he was this sort of weird guy,
this hippie pothead with a scar.
I liked it. Like, I think Robot is probably one of my favorite Doctor Who shows because of this, but I remember liking him, but just thinking, boy, this is really different. This new Doctor Who is really weird. And, I was always nostalgic for Pertwee after that. I really especially liked that. I think that's how I got into it again, as I started watching, like, Monster of Peladon in the 4th grade. They were playing all that last season of Pertwee, and I watched Planet of Spiders again, and then the next week Robot began. That's right. Now I'm just kind of having a bit of a 4th grade flashback, and that's the first time I saw Robot was probably 1979.
See, this is fascinating. You got 3 of us, all lifelong fans of this property, this show. We all love it. Relatively the same age-ish. And all 3 exposed to the property in very different ways.
Yeah.
Very, very different ways. And all kind of latched onto it. So Brian, you were talking about the tendency to sort of repackage shows and make them into movies or on the buses or whatever.
Yeah.
Why? I understand the appeal of Cushing, because Cushing would have been pretty well known at that point because of the Hammer stuff. And so he might have done some Amicus stuff
he had done
that.
Dr. Terror's House of Horrors that same year.
So that was before. Okay, so that same year. Okay.
Well, it was a 65. Yeah. If you look at like Amicus, Sabosky, they really liked Cushing. Mm-hmm. He was. I can't begin to imagine what their what they could be compared to now, but they were name stars who worked cheap.
Right.
Right. Look at how much. The other night, my wife and I were looking for a movie to watch, and we put on Horror Express.
Oh, I love that movie.
So do I. But I avoided it for years because it was at you opened.
People make fun of it.
Yeah. Well, you open a video store back in the 80s, and it was like, oh, you're opening a video store? Well, here's your government issued terrible copy of Horror Express.
Right. Yeah.
There's no pictures on the back. It's garbage. But it turns out the film is actually great. But
yeah, it's really spooky and weird.
This looks like a piece of shit, and I put it down. But I was talking to my wife about it, and she's like, these guys, like, she was asking me all these Cushing and Lee questions. This was not my least favorite evening of the quarantine, because she was going, these guys, do they like each other? And I had to tell her that I bought Peter Cushing's biography in the early 90s, and I remember it was like it was a sweet book, but there was no dirt. Like his chapter on Christopher Lee is just love. And
I think they mostly liked each other.
He was just a really nice man, and but you
apparently like the nicest guy ever, to work with, just consummate professional. And why wouldn't you get Peter Cushing if he's affordable and he's like he's never going to let you down.
He's consistent, and
he's also doing. Sorry to interrupt, but he's also doing something in the Doctor Who film that. I don't know how much of that he did prior, but he's definitely doing a very different sort of character. He's very, I mean, you have to realize he's probably like 50 when he made the movie, but he's playing this sort of doddering, gentle sort of soul.
Yeah,
which
he was
not
52.
that he was like 52. Okay, so
wow.
but
they obviously had to put a wig on him to make him look elderly.
I love that look, by the way. I freaking love his look in these movies.
Yeah,
especially
well, they plopped it right on again for Amicus's At the Earth's Core.
Yes.
Which was now is that the Doug McClure one from the early 70s?
Yeah,
of course it is.
Well, he was in 2, right?
He's in 3.
Land of Time Forgot.
Caroline Munro.
Yeah.
But what's the third one that Cushing did? It was Land of Time Forgot, Earth's Core.
McClure did Land of Time Forgotten.
So Cushing did Earth's Core, and then what was the other one he did?
McClure did 3 or 4.
He did 3.
Well,
he did Land of Time Forgot, People That Time Forgot, and then At the Earth's Core.
Okay, so he's not in Atlantis?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Do you?
No, I don't. I gotta use my little crutch here. I thought he was in the Atlantis film too.
I thought Cushing was in
Warlords of Atlantis too. He's in.
So he is in that one.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Was Cushing in 2 of them?
No, he's just in At the Earth's Core.
He's okay. So 65. So he's like you say he's reasonable. He's easy to get. Works great. People know who he is. It's a recognizable face. It's in color. We're going to redesign the Daleks, etc. Why did they not just take the TV actors at the time and redo the story as it was, because it was massive on television? Now, why not do the same thing that you would have done with another show where you bring the cast with you? Why did they make the changes that they did? And it doesn't enhance it or make it better.
I have a couple theories.
Okay, go ahead.
One, I know that Hartnell wasn't always the easiest person to get along with.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he also forgot his lines pretty much from the very beginning.
No, let me clarify. I'm saying I understand the Cushing idea. I understand getting Cushing.
But why not everybody else?
And why not keep the story as it was? He's this time traveler. He's from another world. His granddaughter's a teenager, yada, yada, yada. Why all that shit? How did that all get changed?
I think it's because they probably felt that it would take too long to explain who he is, what a Time Lord is, even if it's – I mean, back then they didn't even really get into the Time Lord thing, but we just knew he was this intergalactic traveler. I think that they – by doing this particular storyline the way they did, they grounded it more. So it's like Doctor Who is this brilliant scientist who's human, and so that's your way in you can relate. And that everything else was going to be alien.
I think you're onto that. I think it's just sort of like it's a Dalek movie. It's not a Doctor Who movie.
It's more about the Daleks, yes.
But isn't it also that Amicus or Sabatsky or whoever, they know how big this show is. It reminds me kind of Hard Day's Night, in the sense that when that initially was going to happen, the notion from United Artists was kind of like, oh, these guys are a flash in the pan. Just make a quick Elvis type, Hawaii goes Hawaii movie type thing, and in 6 months, it'll hit and we'll make some money, and then we'll never hear from these guys again, kind of thing.
Yeah,
where
Doctor Who aspect to it.
Where Doctor Who, and at that point, Doctor Who was not known in America. It had never aired in America. Right. I don't know where else it might have aired. So I always thought that it was like beyond what you said, that it was also like, look, America, if this hits America, they don't need to know. It says in the credits, I think, based on, the BBC thing or something, or Terry Nation's name
based
or whatever.
On a show you'll never see. Yeah.
So they have to make it instantly accessible.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea that, look, they got to get these people in a time machine in the first 10 minutes.
Yes.
And we're just gonna gloss over the tropes of the series and forget about them.
Okay, all right. So then I'll go.
But wait a minute. Go ahead.
Control room. Well, I'm saying, why not just grab the control room from the BBC and stick it in the thing? It's gorgeous.
That I agree with. Yes.
Well, yeah,
that's a mystery.
Well, I think basically they just licensed the stories, and they decided to make their own. And I bet you they just didn't have they couldn't. Perhaps the show was filming at the same time, or perhaps they just went, well, technically what they did was they bought the Terry Nation script to an episode of a show, and they kind of boiled out a lot of elements of the show because they just wanted to sell you Daleks, and they're the true stars of the movie. It's really weird when you think about it.
Yeah, let's put every dime into the Daleks, and when it comes to the interior of the TARDIS, what's the most interesting aspect to people? Well, it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So we got that. Right. And we don't need the console. All we need to do is set up some beakers and put some Christmas tree lights on the wall, and we're done.
Yeah, it's. I remember. I mean, I think I knew what it was from. It had to be maybe an article or a picture in Starlog or something, maybe, but it might not have been till like the early '80s of the same, the weekly that Brian was talking about, or the monthly, whatever it was.
No, it was the Marvel premiere. That's
the Marvel premiere. Oh yeah, because they give you the history in that Marvel premiere reprint, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, so that might have been it too, but until I saw images, I can't remember when I first saw images, but I didn't actually finally see it, the first one, until I don't think it was necessarily like, we had a thing in the Twin Cities called Horror Incorporated. That was our horror theater on a Friday night or something. I don't think it was that, but it was a late night. I remember it wasn't an afternoon; it was a late night thing, and there it was all of a sudden, and I was like, oh, this is that thing. And I remember it being so jarring to me. It had to be, it must have been 80 or 81 or something before I actually finally saw it. And I just could not get my head around what this was supposed to be or why they were doing it. Because remember, at the time too, I probably only understood, it doesn't. Maybe the listing wasn't there or whatever, but I probably didn't understand that this was 1965 or whatever. I just knew this was definitely a movie they stuck on television. And all I knew was the Tom Baker stuff at that point. So I don't even have reference for the early 60s Daleks.
The Hartnell stuff, yeah.
Hartnell stuff. I knew what the Daleks were because of Genesis, but it just did my head in. Like, I could not figure out what this thing was. And I remember liking Cushing was in it because of Hammer and because of Star Wars, and I watched it for him. But I remember just like it was just this strangeness that it just didn't make any sense to me, and I was a bit of a Puritan, back then. And
it makes sense because most Doctor Who fans that I know who are really into it aren't fans of those films, and I think the fact that this was my entry point, it's got a soft spot. But I get it because it's outside the world of Doctor Who canon, so it's just this weird anomaly. And I get it. By the way, I know you were talking about why not get the people from the actual show to be in the movie.
Yeah.
Another thing with that, I think, was that in making it this movie that hopefully will hit internationally and through all demographics. I think that they wanted maybe a little better looking cast. Not that anyone was ugly in the original cast, but I think they wanted like a little girl for the kids, and then a little bit of a hotter kind of younger girl for Barbara, and then Roy Castle was like a comic relief. And I think they were trying to hit every little button they could to make this thing a success.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been playing their characters anyways, because Ian, like Barbara, is now the Doctor's granddaughter. I think
she's in the family, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and of course, you've got so like that changes the dynamic, and
right.
You've got I don't even know what Ian did. I don't even think he's a teacher in the film.
Yeah,
he's a drug dealer in the film.
Yeah, of course, right.
No, but yes, and that's the Roy Castle guy, and he's a buffoon. He's an absolute buffoon. Like, he can't say his name without tripping over something.
I think he actually really annoys me in the movie.
Well, it's funny you say it, because you're a big fan of, well, I say fan, I'm half joking, but you have a lot of affection for
Bernard Cribbins?
Bernard Cribbins in the Who
Now we're talking.
He's childhood to me, that guy.
But now we're talking. I thought Ian was a buffoon in the first one. This one is like, holy shit!
But he's a better buffoon.
He's just a more talented buffoon.
Yeah, I actually think that movie, the sequel, which did not do as well, I think is a better film.
I think it's an interesting film. I have a very mixed feelings about these movies. It's sort of like certain foods. They're a really good idea. Then you eat them and you go, oh yeah, this is why I don't do this. And I find these movies, like I bought the riff tracks of Doctor Who and the Daleks when it came out.
Yeah, I got very mixed feelings about all of that.
Well, I know. I'm a huge fan. And
I know.
But I got to tell you, it's really funny, because there is so many awkward pauses in that Doctor Who, the first one, where the Daleks are just kind of staring at each other, that they're able to come up with some very fun, like, they're doing kind of like passive aggressive office stuff.
Yeah.
Like, stop it, Carl.
That's funny.
Yeah, it really had it. Like, I was laughing out loud at it, and
but the second one, they're very dated. They're very much at their time, and I have an affection for them. I don't think they're very good, but I have a real affection.
They are good.
I have a real affection. I'm glad they exist.
Son,
I'm glad they're
I love you, but you're dumb.
They are that weird anomaly that exists. That is such a strange thing when you have to sort of explain it away and what the frick happened that this even came about. But there's something about some of the aesthetics that I find really pleasing, and especially the poster art. Like the quad poster for Dalek's Invasion of Earth.
It's amazing.
Fantastic.
That's one of the... and the quad one for Doctor Who and the Daleks is also brilliant.
It's great.
Where you've got the Dalek shooting flames, and which was the original idea that they were going to have.
Right. Yeah. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it probably because everybody would have. Somebody would have
killed everyone.
Somewhere on Twitter, a video, something on Cinema put out this thing today, actually on Twitter, this video of a scene from Towering Inferno, a making of scene of Towering Inferno, and it's Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, Fred Astaire, William Holden, a bunch of people. You're going to be, they tie themselves with a rope to the post, whatever. And you watch this 8 minutes of this, and you go, oh my God, I can't believe nobody died just then when you guys made this scene. Like, then the explosion's going to hit, then the fire's going to kick in, then the water's going to come through, and it's like, it's madness with 8 cameras and shit. So the Dalek thing, the flame coming out of a Dalek. Somebody at one point must have been, we tried it 3 times, but all this, we all got lightheaded and passed out when the flame kept going or the gases being emitted or something.
I also like the idea of the fact that they said, well, you know what, instead of having a flamethrower, why don't we get the thing that puts out the flame? A fire extinguisher.
I want to know who the guy was. Like, we're going to put you in this tin can, and you're going to have a flamethrower in there. Right. And the guy went, okay.
The guy went, how much am I getting paid for this again? Is it
25 pounds a day?
That could have turned into like a BBC Columbine,
Yeah. Can I smoke in here? Of course.
It's insane. And that poster art is great. But that 2150 one with the dude the get up that everybody's in, the
Roboman. Yeah.
The Roboman with the plastic outfits, and which, by the way, you haven't seen sexy until you've seen Peter Cushing in the Roboman outfit.
Yeah, PVC.
You have to tell me. I have the calendar.
Oh yeah.
PVC jumpsuit. But
we meet every year at our annual convention.
It's sort of like it's the Dalek film version of being a furry.
Yeah.
Right. But the 2150 part, beyond being low budget and beyond not being very good, these movies, whatever. When you get to the 2151, that's what really lets it down. If it had been called, Dalek's Invasion of Earth AD 1965. 75.
Wow, you guys are rough.
Well, I just saying,
but
it doesn't.
All the guys are like in late 50s, early 60s kitchen sink drama type British movies, or working the fruit and veg market or whatever, and in the same outfits they would have been in 1966.
Could you argue? First of all, let me just throw some facts in on this, which is. Let's not forget the original productions of these stories.
Oh, yeah.
Where everybody was dressed. The Robo-Men in those are
terrible.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like someone took half of the top of a Cyberman and put it on somebody's head.
Yes, but the argument could be made that, God bless them, for doing what they did and making the shows they did. They couldn't have possibly imagined in a million years anybody would ever see any of that stuff again. Like, it was
that is true
on a British television, 4 inches by 10 inches or whatever the TVs were,
right?
And you would have just been happy to get the entertainment. Here's a big budget or a larger budget blockbuster type picture with a budget, and the Robomen look kind of cool. They look.
I think they're a great design.
They're a great design. The helmets.
The movie one.
That's future to me. That screams 2150 AD to me.
The movie ones are great, and so, but see, that's what I'm saying is that yes, I with all of Doctor Who, I forgive some of the production values because they were always heavy on story, and you got a character. Yeah, the character of the Doctor is William Hartnell was acting his ass off.
Oh yeah. Oh totally. Yeah. Totally.
And so all of that is there, and I get that, but I don't want to shortchange these movies because it's not like the movies had a lot of a budget either. And
I'm just saying
they made the Robomen look better.
I'm saying that they didn't need to go all out. Like, they wouldn't have had the budget to go all out to make all the citizens seem, like they were all made of, crystalline or something, because in the future we're not wearing clothes or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they didn't. There was no attempt to update the clothing of the people. I haven't seen it in a while. Like 5, 6, 7 years.
The 2150 makes you think that this is going to be a city of the future. It's very obvious mid-century England.
Right.
And,
the buildings.
I remember that when they get away in the truck. That's the part. I was probably like 10 when
it's like
I saw
a milk
it.
truck.
I love that.
But make no mistake, like
car chases.
But the truck is a 50s truck, and it's like
a 1959 milk truck.
It's what they have.
I know. I'm not
taken over by the Daleks.
I'm not
That's
trying.
all they got.
I'm not trying to shit on it in any way. I'm just saying
we're
that
gonna shit on it.
The 2150 aspect, they might have. I don't know. They might have been wearing sunglasses, or some. I don't know, something that would have made it seem a little more futuristic than 2150. In 1966, basically, is what I'm saying.
Bathrobes. They should have all been in bathrobes.
Yes. Yeah. It should have just been disembodied voices. There should have been no people. Speaking of those people, one of the guys, speaking of Quatermass, is one of the guys that's in 2150.
Yes.
I think he's the one that he doesn't assault. I forget. It's not Barbara.
The leader of the rebels, or one of the leaders of the rebels. Yeah.
Yes, he was Quatermass in at least 2, right? Didn't they do 2?
Quatermass in the Pit.
Quatermass in the Pit. Did he do a second one though? Was he in another one?
No, the first 2 were Brian Dunleavy.
Brian Dunleavy was in the first one, but this was the first color one, right? That was Dunleavy did. Was Dunleavy in color? Was Dunleavy's in color?
Dunleavy did 2,
and those were in color.
Those were in black and white.
Those were in black and white. So this guy,
one is Enemy from Space, otherwise known as Enemy from Space, otherwise known as Quatermass 2.
So this one, the one I'm thinking of with this guy whose name I'm forgetting, that was the one that at the end, it's got that bleak ending, that really great, where it's kind of that maybe not the ending, but there's like a part that it's sort of a bombed out London sort of.
Yeah, but it's the bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Its name is Andrew Keir, by the way.
Andrew Keir, that's right. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Andrew Keir.
Yeah. I have
did you ever see the mid 70s or late 70s Quatermass with
the John Mills?
Yeah.
Who?
Careful.
John Mills. It's like doesn't Quatermass die at the end of that one?
Well, now I guess I don't need to see it.
Oopsie. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. It reminds me a lot of Torchwood now.
I haven't seen it it might have been on public television at some point when I was a kid. I remember that, and they did a BBC version in the I want to say early '80s of Day of the Triffids. They did a
TV series.
A TV.
That's
good. I've seen that more recently. That holds up. That's pretty good.
The only British science fiction program I never really caught on to, of that genre, was the Tripods.
I was just going to ask you about I was just going to throw that title out. I'm not kidding.
Show, right? Was it like a kids thing?
Not really.
They were young. They'd probably be considered like young adult now.
Yeah, I think they would probably be like the Hunger Games or that sort of thing.
It was a trilogy of books, I think.
It was a trilogy of books, and to be honest with you, I was around that age when it came on, but I just never really caught into it. It's not one of those.
Well, it was that time where they took Doctor Who off the air.
Yeah.
They canceled it basically and said, "Look, we're going to reevaluate what the show is because nobody's watching." And Michael Grade was in charge of BBC.
We need more sunglasses.
But he did not wear sunglasses, and he hated it. And the BBC took all their money for any kind of fantasy type show, and put a lot of money into this Tripods thing. And then, of course, the big complaint was, where are the tripods? I think people have affection for it, but it's two things happen. I think is one is it was the soap opera type thing that eventually you'd see a tripod in the distance, which with a really cool design for the tripod, but it was model motion and whatever, and it looked okay. And then maybe you'd see a leg. Like you'd have two humans in a seat next to a giant leg, but it was the amount of tripods you actually saw in the thing was very minimal. Then they had a second season where the lead character gets to, the city of gold or whatever it is, and then you see the creatures that are in the tripods, and that's a whole other story. But
was that good?
It was interesting. I remember, there was nothing to watch back then. There was nothing to, and Channel 2, which is public television in Twin Cities, they grabbed this show because Doctor Who was a big thing for them, and they do the pledge drives, and Doctor Who was a big part of it, and the conventions were really kicking off in the mid-'80s and stuff, and all those guys were doing the rounds. So they grabbed the tripods, and there was nothing to watch. So I watched all of it. I don't remember it very well, but then I remember they get to the end of the second season, and it's this abrupt, bleak, like you when it ends, you just go, oh, they're going to keep this going. They have to keep this going because that's a bummer. And that never happened. They never got a third series, and so it ends on this. It's like, oh, it was a dream all along, kind of thing.
Yeah, like Blake 7.
Yeah.
You know what? Not as bad, but close. It was close to Blake 7. Yeah.
I love that show.
I love Blake 7 as well, and I fell in love around that time with reruns of the Tomorrow People, which makes Doctor Who look giant budgeted.
Yeah, I got to go back to that. I have some, and I've watched a few, and I found them to be charming, but not necessarily engaging.
I haven't revisited them, but I don't know if I was like 17 or what, but I would come home from school and watch them, and I got hooked. But I was also very aware that they were, not well made.
Right.
There was just so much shaky sets, and there were
chroma key stuff all over the
terrible
really
chroma
basic.
key. I liked the concept a lot, and that's why I think it keeps getting brought back. Is it's actually a really good idea,
Good idea, yeah.
The
Tomorrow People was that was like 3 or 4 seasons, right? Of that show.
Yeah, it ran a while, and it ran to the point where, like, you know, there was some jokes. I remember reading a British magazine, one of those ones that they used to sell about science fiction. They always feature Doctor Who, and they did a piece on the Tomorrow People, and they weren't kind. I remember buying it, and it was like, you know, the last time we saw Tyso, he was battling the real enemy, acne. You know, and because, like, you know, the kids were getting older, and I remember that Tyso is shown very little in the last season, and when he is shown, you can see there's just like a pancake of makeup on his face. You know.
Hey, did you guys ever see Cruise of the Gods with Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon?
No.
Yes.
Oh, you'd love this.
Oh.
Because they're all like, it's all about a fan cruise about. It's a fan cruise for the actors of this show called The Children of Castor.
Oh my God!
And David isn't David Williams in it too?
Yeah.
It's David Williams, and Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. And in fact, Brian,
James Corden, my favorite.
James Corden, yeah, he was really good in it.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I think
I'm not crazy about the show, but
yeah,
I think it's up. I think it's either streaming on Prime or maybe like BritBox or something. But it's up there. Maybe it's on BritBox, but it's worth. You would get a big kick out of it, Brian.
You'd love it. It's got a lot of heart. It's funny, but a lot of heart.
Oh,
it says a lot about, you know, fan culture, or at the same time,
it's the people, so I'm in.
The people are all great, and then it gets into, you know, that how important really fans are to a celebrity, and how sometimes they might take their own fans for granted, and it's really a sweet movie.
So here's a fun one. You guys, I bet you both know this, but Brian, I know you're a big fan of Matt Berry.
Yes.
Oh my God,
Matt, we've talked about, you know that I know Fulcher from the Boosh and stuff, and we all of the Boosh, and then by extension Richard Ayoade and all these people.
Yes,
we know Garth Marenghi, but have you guys seen the follow-up Man to Man with Dean Lerner?
Yeah, that's really meta.
I haven't, and I want to, because I'm in love with Richard Ayoade.
Okay, Ayoade's, you know, he's Dean Lerner, but Matthew Holness, who, you know, was really at the heart of Garth Marenghi and was Garth Marenghi.
Yeah,
he shows up in the talk show. The talk show that doesn't exist. He's a different character in every episode, and one of them he plays this American actor who was in a sci-fi show that lasted for like a season back in the early 90s, and he's making the rounds at conventions and stuff. And it is the character that they've created is so bizarre, but you get footage of him at the actual convention, which is like, it's not even a convention. It's like the lobby of a hotel, you know, up north or something, and 4 people show up, and he's charging him, you know, cash and whatever. But it's done with affection, but also it is so brutal. You know, they just nail that culture, and the guys that were like 4th or 5th down the cast list that are still dining out on stories about being a half robot character in a show from the early 90s.
I gotta check that out too. Yeah. I always thought Man to Man with Dean Lerner is like Fernwood Tonight. Like, it's so strange that it is spun off of something that's strange. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
right. Yes.
Yeah. It is. It's like I don't even know how you'd pitch that thing. Marenghi didn't do well, but how?
Yeah. So let's spin it off into it even more. Now, if you haven't seen Garth Marenghi, you're confused. Twice as hard, and you know, it's so strange.
It's so strange.
Marenghi must have done well in retrospect, right? Or like after the fact.
I remember the first time I knew what it was a review of it in SFX magazine, and it showed that publicity shot of the cast, and it explained. Maybe it was like I take it back. It might have been when the DVD got released several years after the show aired. And SFX did a review in the magazine somewhere, and I was like, what is that? And I eventually found it on Region 2 DVD, and you know, just went nuts. But yeah, it's sort of a secret handshake for a lot of people.
Oh,
but
the extra stuff on that DVD is incredible.
It's incredible.
Oh, I didn't
the
even know that existed.
Thing, there's extras in the Man-to-Man DVD that are even stranger than the actual show, where they sort of do these. And you're just, I mean, and Iwata just never breaks. I mean, he's Dean Lerner throughout the whole.
Oh yeah,
thing.
He's amazing.
And by the way,
Love
Matt,
him.
is the first episode of his new talk show, Man to Man, because he owns a porn magazine and some some clubs and stuff. But the first episode of the show, his first guest is Garth Marenghi.
Yeah, that's the only one I've watched.
You get to see Garth Marenghi come back in this show.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, it's great. So.
Hey, did you guys ever watch Hyperdrive?
I watched Hyperdrive. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that show.
I thought that really got shit on when it came out. And I thought they did 2 seasons, right? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
One? Yeah.
Yeah. And what's great about that show is that it has an ending. Like there's a storyline that they bring up in the first season that follows all the way through and has a really genuinely interesting twist ending.
That's right. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that getting to the last episode and like going, "Oh wow, that was something." Like, yeah, I thought it was, it was fine. It was good. There were some of them were really good. The way they played
Nick
the
Frost
tropes.
show. I'm sorry.
Nick Frost. Yeah,
I got
Nick
confused
Frost.
with this CGI show that used to be on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah, it was Nick Frost.
Oh, yeah.
It
right.
Also had Kevin Eldon in the cast. Kevin Eldon to me is one of these guys that is a secret weapon in anything you put him in.
Yes.
And the first thing I ever saw him in was this Big Train, the sketch show. That,
I love Big Train.
Yeah.
He was one of the cast members in Big Train, and then he showed up in Spaced, and then everything he sort of shows up in, you're like, God,
Dead Set.
Dead Set. He is so committed to every character he does, and I remember him being great in that Hyperdrive show. And the other one is Miranda.
Yeah.
What's her name? I can't think of her name.
Blanking on her name too. Yes.
Yes, she's gotten pretty well known in the States. And
doing
stuff.
really well.
But I'd have to revisit that show. I thought that was a pretty decent show.
It's really good. Hey, let me throw another one out to you.
Yeah.
Because I have mixed feelings about this show, Survivors.
I loved Survivors.
So here's my thing with Survivors.
That's the one about
Terry Nation.
That's the one that's there's
Terry Nation. Yes.
And a plague sort of happens. It's funny. I found that on Region 2 at Amoeba. Rest in peace. At Amoeba, and it was like $4 for the entire series. And I might have it here somewhere. And I watched 2 episodes, and I was genuinely like kind of. It's shocking that this is so bleak. This is so. It was surprising to me just how dark it went, even in the first 2. And then I didn't go back to it, and I'm not sure I could watch it now. But I remember thinking I need to watch it.
Here's my thing. From a dramatic standpoint, the first season I love so much because it sets up this dystopian scenario, kind of like The Walking Dead at its best, where you have these factions that are fighting against each other for control, amongst the survivors of this plague.
Yeah.
But by the second season, it starts to get into, now we're rebuilding society. And so there's a bunch of episodes about we got to our crops are failing. We got to figure out how to save our crops. And I'm sorry, guys, but this isn't really why I tune in. I want more civil unrest. I kind of get a little bored with the oh my God, we need a new cow because the other cow died.
See now I don't need to watch season 2. I could just pop in season 1 and finish that.
Yeah, but I went into it loving it. Well, and the first season was really entertaining.
I just remember that first episode. You're following this lead character, this woman who was she in Blake Sutton? Who is that woman? Why do I know that woman from? I know her from something.
Maybe looks familiar, but I don't know.
But you're following her, and it so takes its time.
Yes.
You're watching the character in real time start to figure out what the hell is going on, why no one is in the house and why the phone isn't working and all this stuff. And it's really, really bleak. And then by the second episode, she's trying to make her way somewhere, and some douchebag is already like hoarding food or something. It happens.
Right, and that's an episode where they do a really good job of showing post-apocalyptic justice and how that goes awry.
Yeah,
and that's a really shocking episode.
That's the one isn't that the one where they, without giving too much away, it's sort of like someone is sort of left behind, where like you can either cut your leg off or you can eat your face, and then you'll like they sort of leave someone with just enough to like they're gonna have to get up, like someone's got a broken leg or they'll never make it to the road or whatever, and it's really
I think there's that. The one the scene that I'm remembering is there is someone who is blamed for a crime that he didn't commit, and if I want to say that the person who is blamed is not all there in the head.
Okay. Okay.
The real person who did it is a terrible, like, when they find him, he's like this drunk. He's like this kind of slimy drunk character. Yeah. And he somehow manages to shift the blame for the thing that he did. And I remember being shocked by this, and like, oh my God, wow, they're really going there with this series.
It's really it's funny. Terry Nation, and you guys, I'm sure you both know this, but Terry Nation, for those that don't, got his start writing on comedy shows like Hancock's Half Hour in the UK. How he made the transition to be this guy that wrote, action. I think he might have written a couple of Avengers episodes and maybe The Saint and stuff. But it's funny that he gets started, writing, comedy stuff or sketches and things. And, he had major influence on Doctor Who, created these Daleks, and somehow was loaded. By the time you get to the late 60s, early 70s, he's a millionaire.
Yeah, he was doing okay.
I've never understood how the hell that happened. He does.
It was
get the rights to the Daleks.
Yeah, there was a lucrative BBC.
But I'm saying I can't think of another example of the BBC. Like somehow the Pythons had a certain amount of control. Like that famous story is like the show. The entire show was going to get wiped. They kept wiping, like a lot of the Doctor Who, obviously, like they use the tapes over again and record football matches and stuff. And somebody from the BBC called Terry Jones and said, "Hey, they're about to wipe some of your shows. Do you want to get these?" And Terry Jones, ran to the BBC to get their entire library, their catalog, and then somehow they retained some amount of rights over the show, because by the time it gets to America, when the Midnight Special starts running, the Midnight Special in the mid-70s, before PBS, before like it became a thing on PBS, maybe it was playing in Dallas or something, but the Midnight Special grabbed some of these sketches because the albums were getting big in the mid-70s. DJs and potheads and shit were listening to the sketches on albums and stuff. So people knew about Python a bit before the shows hit. Midnight Special takes some of these sketches and starts re-editing them. And somebody gets, some American, friend of Gilliam's or whoever, or Palin, somebody said, they're putting this stuff on the TV, and it's not. They're changing the sketches when they aired in England, and they took ABC to court, and the Pythons won. It became this precedent-setting case. A guy called Robert Hewison that was classmates with Palin from the time they were teenagers. Ended up being a barrister, and I think he represented them, or he wrote about it, or I forget how it goes, but they won. And it was like there was a clause that Terry Jones put into their contracts that said you cannot alter these sketches without our consent.
And
it was a precedent-setting thing from 1969. I don't know how it happened. Wow. So then before that, you had Terry Nation with the Daleks. Other than that, it's hard at thinking of anything from that period where anybody had that kind of control, or that
the guy who created the Zarbi had the control, but nobody wanted it.
That's where you're wrong. I wanted Wind Up Zarbi. Speaking of all these shows, what about The Champions? Was that a show that you guys?
I saw that they put the pilot. Remember when they used to take ITC programs and mash them into movies? So there's like 4 Space 1999 movies, and there's one UFO, and there's a whole bunch of Thunderbirds and that stuff. There is a Champions movie. and it's probably one of the most coherently edited of the ITC lore, because they use a framing device of one episode where the guy's being interrogated to play the pilot in the middle of it, and it's actually pretty good. And that's
clever.
Yeah, it was. I remember thinking, like, this is the of all, because I knew what they were when I saw them. I think it was about 15 or 16, and I was well aware that there was no connection between the two Space 1999s, but they had done a really good job of editing this. And I remember, I've never seen the rest of the Champions, but I watched that pilot, like that 2-hour movie, and thought that was really good. You know, like,
isn't it very
Champions is it Peter Wingard?
Wingard is Department S. He was Department S.
He's Department S.
Yeah. But I think the guy that's in
he's actually in an episode of Space 1999 too.
He's also in a Doctor Who. He's in Revelation of the Daleks.
Oh, no way.
He's the guy with the beard in Revelation, that Colin Baker story. I forget his name, but it's two guys, and the American, I think the one dude's an American. He ended up on
Damon. Yeah.
General Hospital, like in the early 80s.
I don't know if I've seen this.
I forget who the woman is. Secret agents that crash in the Himalayas. Yes. And in Tibet, they're given powers. So, like, extrasensory perception.
It's very like very Marvel Comics kind
of.
I gotta check this out again. I think I might have.
Will not be blown away by the effects. They are kind of a pre-Lee Majors, lots of slow motion. But the idea was kind of cool.
But it's that.
No, I want to see this. I have to see this.
It's that ITC period where they were churning out these shows that were, then the Persuaders happened, the Champion.
Who were the Persuaders?
The Persuaders was Roger Moore and Tony Curtis.
And Tony Curtis, okay. All right.
Tony
that
Curtis.
One I think I have seen.
And Tony Curtis Tony Curtis is rarely without his driving gloves in every scene. I'll never forget one scene where he breaks into a barn and he's trying to get around the side of the barn to listen to these bad guys. And he goes over to a sink and washes his hand. He runs water over. He's wearing his driving gloves. He doesn't take them off, but he goes over to the sink and runs the water to put his hands under the tap. And
very nice glove.
When you realize, later when you start hearing from Roger Moore, all the stuff that he said about it, and the trouble that Curtis got into when they were making the show. He got busted at the airport, I think. He was never not completely stoned making this show. And he very difficult to work with, apparently. But it was one of those things where, and you see it in a lot of that ITC stuff, the establishing shots, they would get a crew and they would hit Italy or, Greece or wherever. They would shoot a ton of footage. And, this week the Saint is in, Paris doing whatever. It's like, no, he's not. He's just in a studio, But it was like a way to make like a travelogue, for the fans and for the viewers and stuff. And ITC, I think the Persuaders there was a slot for a show, and Lou Grade knew Roger Moore from the Saint and said, "How would you like to make, $10 million, whatever they were giving him at the time?"
Yeah, that was around the same time as the Protectors, wasn't it?
And the Protectors.
Okay, now what was that one?
Now there's another one. What's the Protector?
Jerry Anderson. One of the Jerry Anderson show no one talks about because there's no spaceships in it or puppets. It's they did 2 seasons,
but a lot of
I think.
Yes,
but it's a half an hour, I think it's a spy show, but it stars Robert Vaughn and Tony Anholt, who ended up on Space 1999. And the only thing I know about it, I don't ever remember watching it, but
I've never seen it.
It was that kind of it's unique because it's half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those shows were 50 minutes, not 25. But the only thing that I know about it is that Anderson hated Robert Vaughn. Anderson doesn't really ever he's a gentleman, but he
doesn't even badmouth his wife, his ex-wife.
Yeah, and
when he was alive, no.
But he really, really didn't like Robert Vaughn. That's all I know about it. And Robert Vaughn, Robert Vaughn says that Lou Grade and Jerry Anderson were always fighting. But yeah, it's just
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Had you guys ever heard before that Robert Vaughn was difficult?
I've never really looked into it.
I don't think I know he was hell on Superman 3 or Supergirl. What was the one he was in? Was he in Supergirl?
3.
Was he in Superman 3? No, I've never really heard much about him actually at all. Anyway, he's just one of those guys that I don't know when I even knew what The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was, because we had it in reruns when I was a little kid, but I know him from The Magnificent Seven and
Battle Beyond the Stars,
where he plays the same part.
Battle Beyond the Stars. Yes, exactly.
There's a really funny. There's very few actors who've done that. Where they end up doing the homage to their own role.
There's
a really funny. It's a depressing Canadian movie called Going Down the Road, and it's filmed in the early 70s. And of course, it stars Canadian actors, but what I've always found funny is SCTV parodied the Going Down the Road, and the same actress plays the same part in the parody.
Wow,
that's great. That's so
is this
great.
the one that is this the skit that has them going doing an attitude?
Yeah, they listen to that's Stompin' Tom Connor's music. Yeah, it's the one where the two East Coasters come to Toronto to get jobs.
That's right. I love that.
It's not a fun movie. It's really depressing. Okay. And they're not doctors and lawyers like they are. They're just warehouse workers.
Right.
And I remember, I watched the movie finally after the SCTV, and I didn't really enjoy it. It was depressing. And my father-in-law, who saw it in the theater, he said, "Oh yeah, we just all was just left in silence after the end of that thing."
SCTV fixes everything.
Yep. I've actually been asked by people this is a funny thing where have you ever seen this movie? And I go, no. But the answer is always, but I read the Mad Magazine adaptation,
right?
Or I saw the SCTV parody of it.
Right. Hey, now you were saying about, was it The Protectors? Was the half-hour show?
Yes.
Wasn't Danger Man also originally a half-hour?
Yeah. I don't know.
And he was American in the beginning, right? And then they first inexplicably turn him into English.
Well, I imagine that James Bond had something to do with that.
Yeah.
I've never been able to figure out, because I've never really paid much attention, if Danger Man or what the differences are between the two shows.
Well, I think that. Well, you mean Danger Man and Secret Agent Man?
Secret Agent.
Yeah, Secret Agent Man. I think because Danger Man is actually up on again, it's up on Prime. You can watch the whole.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I sort of dipped into it a while back because I'm
It's good.
The Prisoner and everything. It is good. I could never quite get a handle on. I would have known him from The Prisoner first, I think.
Yeah.
Before I knew the Secret Agent Man song that Johnny Rivers did, before I think I ever saw the show. So I would have known him as this very specific, and I think he was also in Ice Station Zebra.
Yes.
With
Rock. And he was Dr. Sin for Disney.
Yes, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I would have, and so that clipped voice that he had, that amazing accent, that clipped voice. And then when I started watching Secret Agent Man again recently, or Danger Man, it was what is he doing? What is he doing with this accent? How is he trying to sound?
It's all over the place. I think originally they wanted him to be American because, once again, you're trying to appeal to an international audience, and everybody loves Americans.
In the same way that British movie trailers never have the cast speaking for a lot, because they want to fool you into seeing a British movie, which was, growing up in a Commonwealth country, that's just weird to me, but I get it,
That's interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Never noticed.
Well, because there's an amazing parody of a British movie trailer in Grindhouse by the director of Shaun of the Dead.
It's called Don't.
Yeah, and they mentioned you don't hear anyone speaking in Don't.
Right.
Because that's how you would package a British movie to America.
And he got all these people to come out to do these shots where they're just about to open their mouths to speak. And it's like, don't, or they die. And it's brilliant. In fact, I don't even know. It's funny. I went to the theater to see like Grindhouse Day, like the double feature that Friday that both. Yeah. And I haven't seen those trailers since. They're probably like on YouTube or something. But I think I have. What's the I think I have Death Proof on a Tarantino box set, and then I might have Planet Terror somewhere, but I don't know if that stuff is on there, like those trailers.
Yeah, I watched.
Is it on there?
Yeah, I watched Planet Terror not Planet Terror. I watched Death Proof with my daughter, and they were at the start of Death Proof.
I cannot stand Death Proof. I like bits of Death Proof.
I'm with you.
I cannot abide. Like, that's one of the things I'd point to where I'd say, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Mickey Rourke was right not to take that part. Other than that, he should have taken it. But it just, I cannot. I've tried multiple times. I saw it in the theater, and I really tried, and I get where it's trying to go, but it's so indulgent. It might be the most indulgent.
Yeah, it's trying to hit you with too many things. And you would think that Quentin Tarantino would know how to parody something like that, considering the fact that he loves all that stuff.
Yeah,
but it just misses the mark.
It doesn't even, like, there are moments that it has where you go, yeah, that's pretty on the nose. He's getting it there. And then there's just these 17-minute conversations.
I'm a fan of it, but I will say to you, yeah, it could be tighter. And I think that ending sequence is fantastic. And but yeah, no, there's some fat to be trimmed.
But the funny
I think Planet Terror is way more entertaining.
Yeah, yet I go back to Death Proof more now, oddly enough. But I got to tell you, I saw that movie. I think it started at 10 o'clock at night.
Oh wow!
And I remember going with my friend, and we had a few beers, and then we went to see the movie. And like what did that come out? 2006, 2007.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So I would have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home, and it is Easter Saturday. And I go see this movie, and my wife goes, "That's fine, but you're getting up for the Easter egg hunt." Just remember, I think I dozed off. Because, again, I'm a new dad. And
yeah, that's not your fault.
It's 12:30 or, almost 1 o'clock, and they're in those bar scenes. And I think I might have dozed off during one of them. But I woke up again and saw the ending and enjoyed it. But, yeah.
I just remember that, in L.A., nobody works. Nobody, especially now. Like, before the pandemic, you go to Trader Joe's at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, and you can't find a parking space because nobody has nobody works.
Right. When do you work? When do people work?
Yeah, exactly. So you'd go to an opening day, even back then, where the theater would be at least half full. And, of course, it's Tarantino. And, this is all the film geeks are going to come out for this. It might have been the ArcLight that I went to. I forget what it was at the time. But I remember going into the theater and looking around and going, oh, my God, there's only about 15 people in the theater. It wasn't like the 9 a.m. It was like noon or 1 o'clock or whatever it was. And I knew that, like, this thing is not going to... Like, I know what they were trying to do, and I admire what they wanted to do, to have a full day of, like, a double feature kind of thing. And I think they overestimated.
A lot to ask.
Yeah, they overestimated the desire for that. But what's funny about Danger Man, too, is you can't help watch. Go back to Danger Man, but Patrick McGowan, you can't help watch a show like that. Prisoner's a little different, and it was the same thing with Prisoner. But Danger Man, where it's like, he wouldn't, as far as I know, he would be in scenes with women, but he couldn't be in love scenes. He couldn't be in romantic scenes.
Because he's Catholic, right? Wasn't that it was a religious thing.
He wouldn't kiss, so it's like, okay, what, a James Bond type. It's like, but he's not going to kiss anybody. And that was the grounds that he had to not take the Bond role. I mean, he was offered Bond.
Right. Yes,
Connery. And he's like, well, no, he's immoral, and he, beds a lot of women, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's extraordinary that they built shows around him that were action sort of based, But
what's funny too is what it inadvertently, I guess, forced it to be is different. Like it felt and looked different. It seemed like Drake was really more into like, yeah, I don't have time for this. I have a job I got to do.
Right. Yeah. No, it was, but it also, part of the appeal of such things would have been just like the Persuaders, throw in a couple of lovely ladies.
Well, there were ladies. They just didn't deal with him too much.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really any sex or anything like that.
Listen, if I'm going to watch McGowan, I want to see him have sex. Okay. So,
who doesn't?
Maybe I'm just.
Once again, my slash fiction. You've got to check it out.
My Drake.
With Patrick, go ahead.
My Drake prisoner slash fiction. I have them going at it together, basically.
I always think that Patrick McGowan felt to me like he was sort of like the other side of the coin of Tom Baker, because you know how Tom Baker comes off like an alien.
Yeah.
McGowan came off to me like that too, but a little bit meaner. Like like this is a guy you don't want to fuck with. He's not silly, but his acting style it was a little off kilter. It always kept you slightly uncomfortable.
Totally. And I it's funny, the last time I sort of dipped into The Prisoner, I started to think about like what would he have been like as the Doctor?
That's
like,
exactly. I've always thought he would have been an amazing Doctor.
He would have been really. He would have because he's all business in The Prisoner.
Yeah.
Like he knows they're fucking with him, and he plays the game, but he only plays the game for about 2 or 3 exchanges, and then he goes right for the jugular. Like he does not fuck around. He does not have time.
But he's also quite funny.
He is.
Yes, he's extremely funny.
Yes. He would have been great.
Really drunk.
And I would have just liked him in his prisoner outfit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that works. That does work. It would have been interesting to see, too, the type of companion that they would pair him up with.
A dude.
It would have to be a dude.
It would have to be a dude.
Or a woman.
Or a really old lady.
An old lady, a frumpy old woman that's kept about 20 feet away from him.
The Doctor and the Dame.
But it would have been... But isn't that funny, though? It would have been, considering his morality, considering how uptight he was about, like, even having a hint of romance in a scene or a suggestive line from a woman. These actresses in these interviews for The Prisoner were like, he was a big drinker, too. But they would say that he was a strange guy, and like he just the things that were in the script, like no, not doing that. Well, the Doctor would have been this, up until recently, he was very kind of, he wasn't quite asexual, but he wasn't. He always had a
sexual
young. Well, yeah, and it would have been like kind of a perfect thing for McGowan, to go at. Like,
no kissy back then.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Have those fights with him. Just put him in the
Not
role.
until Lenny Henry, if I remember the sketch correctly.
Lenny Henry. Was that like the Colin Baker era that Lenny Henry had a sketch or something?
I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Did you guys remember that? Oh boy, now you just made me think of something. Do you remember it's probably very easy to find now on YouTube or something, but the comic relief Doctor Who thing that
Curse of the Fatal Death.
Yeah.
Curse of the Fatal Death.
That's a lot
and
better.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, maybe I'm just...
It was Rowan Atkinson and Julia Sohara, who was in Absolutely Fabulous, and Hugh Grant shows up, and Joanna Lumley, and everybody. But I remember that being the cover of Doctor Who magazine. There was so nothing going on with Doctor Who at the time that the cover was Rowan Atkinson, is the Doctor or whatever. And I think I eventually saw it on a burned VHS. Like
Stephen
it went.
Moffat wrote it, eh?
Moffat.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But it was
the reboot.
Jonathan Pryce, isn't it too? I think
Jonathan Pryce is the master, and
there's
watching that special made me think that Rowan Atkinson could have been a really good Doctor Who.
He would have been great. He would have been great.
Was that great for me loud enough?
So here's the question.
You don't like it? You don't like Rowan?
I didn't hate him in it, but I don't know. I don't think I can detach him from his comedic roles. I'd always expect him.
He plays it fairly straight in the Moffat thing, but when you watch him in Blackadder, as funny as he is in Blackadder, he's kind of the straight man in Blackadder. Everybody else is huge and big and broad, and he's sort of the Basil Fawlty that sort of, has that acerbic thing. But, for
I liked
years,
Richard E. Grant as the Doctor in that.
Yeah, Richard E. Grant
was
brilliant.
in that. I forgot.
Yeah, he has the best line in it too, because the Master has those Dalek bumps, and I think he just walks in and says, "Nice boobs," and it's just a fun.
That was the best. That was the best
line in the entire thing.
So we had the 2 Doctor Who movies, and then
wait a minute. Wait, we got to mention one more here, because we have talked about Doctor Who. We haven't talked about the latest incarnation, the female Doctor. I'm sure we all agree that show has a lot of problems, but Joanna Lumley would have been a great Doctor.
Yeah. Yes, and I would have been perfectly fine. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That would have been fine. And by the way, I'm not even going to touch. We all agree that the new show has a lot of problems. A lot of problems is the understatement of the decade for what that show has become in so many ways, and has nothing to do with.
I don't even want to do a thing.
I can't
because it's.
But
I'm with you.
Yeah.
There was a time in, I want to say 76 or 77 or so, where Tom Baker was floating around the idea of doing that feature called
Doctor Who Meets Scratchman.
Doctor Who Meets Scratchman, or versus Scratchman, or whatever it was. And it was going to be about the devil, and I think he had talked to Vincent Price was going to be in it, and he was writing it with Ian Marter and all this stuff.
You know what? I can picture how that thing would have looked.
Yeah, and it sounded insane.
Giant pinball machine at the end, I think.
Yeah, and there was something to do with cows or sheep or something. It was really, really kind of mental, and it wouldn't have worked as the way they
no.
wrote it. But it would have been. But what a strange alternate universe that would have been.
I'm sure they could have gotten Vincent Price. I believe that could have happened.
Yes,
I think he had already spoken to him or something.
Yeah, I would love to Yeah, I can totally see how that, because it would have looked like a Amicus film from the early 70s. It would have been loud and garish, but looked like it was filmed. I don't know how to explain. Ruddy,
But wouldn't that have been a strange alternate universe?
Yeah, and I wonder what they would have. They would have probably taken liberties with it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It would have. You know what? That thing would have ended up looking like the monkey's head version of Doctor Who.
Yeah. Well, it would have been interesting. You would have had a massive hit show on the air currently, and then they would have, in their time off, would have made this movie, and it would have been that part of that footnote to the history of the show and how many shows that existed. The Batman show had a movie, and X-Files had a movie, and da-da-da-da. It would have been interesting, to say the least. But if because for years, in the doldrums, when there was no Doctor Who on the air, one of the things that kept getting mooted was, Spielberg's going to make a movie, or someone's going to make a movie. So, rapid fire. If like tomorrow they could greenlight a big budget Doctor Who movie that is, not to do with the show that's currently on, you could just do what you did back in 65, 66, take the character and whatever. Who would you cast?
And we're not trying to emulate a previous Doctor.
You can do whatever you want. You can say Al Roker if you want, if that's your or whoever. They don't have to be in any acting field. It could be anybody that you think would be good. Who would you pick?
That's a
Matt?
really good question.
Thank you.
Richard Iowati.
I love Richard Iowati.
That's who I wanted for the next Doctor after Capaldi. That's the guy that I kept saying, you got everything in one go here. He's wonderful, and he would bring something very different. And you wouldn't expect him to be comical. He could be more serious and do something different, and the comedy happens around him, etc.
Have you ever watched his TV show? I'm addicted to it. Travel Man. Yeah.
Freaking great! It's great.
Yeah, I've not. That's good.
He's got
kind of a robot in real life. I think that's
he's got Travel. Yeah. You want some fun? Look at there's Criterion does these, Criterion in the closet, where Gilliam or whoever is in the Criterion offices in the closet gets to pick out 3 movies to take with them, and they have a hell of a time trying to find 3 movies that they can just limit it to. Watch the Iowati one. It is. I'm not sure he gets to pick one. He spends so much time just looking at the shelves and dithering that he can't pick one.
Right.
But yes, okay, that is a great. I'm not sure I would say that movie was, but I love that choice. I absolutely love that choice. That's
I think he could show us some range that we don't realize is there. I think that he's actually to be as precise as he is in things like the IT Crowd.
Yeah.
I think that shows a lot of talent. I've also seen him on a bunch of talk shows just riffing, and he's wonderful.
Yeah. I'm good with that. Brian?
Richard Ayoade was, gosh, I don't know if I can beat that. I haven't really thought of it before. Funny, I used to think.
How about Living or Dead?
Living or Dead? Oh, that'd be it.
We could do Living or Dead, as long as it's James Corden.
Well, Rebel.
Oh, God, help us.
Is,
Sorry.
I'm trying to think. You know what? I don't know.
Well, that's not good enough, Brian.
I know it's the
That's
pressure.
not how we play this game.
Golly,
Well, how about you,
Yeah,
Lindsay?
Why you
That's
go?
none of hey. This is not about me. That's none of your business.
Come on, you have one.
How did this suddenly become about me? It's just a question I wanted to ask. I don't know. I think in terms of slightly younger, but what I mean is
okay.
Let's say, I wouldn't say this wouldn't mean my choice necessarily, but if you're trying to get everything kind of in one go, I think like someone like Tom Hiddleston. If you've seen like High Rise or some of the other stuff that Hiddleston's done,
that's a good one.
He's got a great. He's of course a very handsome fellow, but he's got a way he sort of moves sometimes that I think is kind of fun to watch, interesting to watch, and I could see him doing something. I don't think he's been given the chance to do something a little bit more eccentric. I think a Jarmusch. Was it Jim Jarmusch that did Only Lovers Left Alive? Maybe it wasn't Jarmusch.
Yes, which is a great movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie, and he's great in it. He's very understated and great in it, and he's got the physical presence too. I think that's good for a part like that. So he's someone sort of. Okay, all right.
Here we go.
I would go with what the hell's his real name? Shazad Latif.
Shazad Latif.
Now,
what has he been in?
He's on Penny Dreadful, and he was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh,
he's Clem Fandango. I didn't want to open with Clem Fandango.
Okay,
that
Clem
would taint
Fandango.
him.
Yes,
but he was really great on Penny Dreadful.
He was great.
Yeah,
I was like, and he's dressed. He's a Victorian doctor in the show. And when I was watching that, it took me a while to remember. I was thinking he would be a great doctor because he's. I didn't realize he could. I've always thought of him as comedically timing, and he's young, he's handsome, and I thought this is a great choice for a doctor. I would watch this doctor.
That would be good.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. I thought for a time when they sort of bounced it around like it was coming back in the, you had the TV movie and then things were looking like it, will it, won't it? I kept thinking of Adrian Edmondson at that time. I thought, man, that was he could really, and it wouldn't be the bouncing off the walls, but it would be a more subdued, but with that because what he always had was that. Even when he was in his quieter moments, he had this thing that you never knew what he was going to do next. He had this sort of unpredictability, and I would think about him at those times. Why don't they call someone like he should be the guy? Like he should be not big and wacky, but playing it for real, but eccentric. And I thought he would be,
comedy. I've always felt that my favorite doctors are the ones who could play villains in movies.
Mm-hmm.
And like Baker played great villains, and
yes, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
Troughton too.
Troughton played Hartnell was a bad guy in everything.
Yeah,
Capaldi, he did some really he played awful people.
Oh yeah,
yes,
something about that they seem to make great doctors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's and that's the thing too. Here you've got the show that starts with an irritable, kind of a mean old man that's snapping at everybody, and it's a strange kind of hero to have at the center of your show.
Mm-hmm.
It's made into movies in 65, 66, and he's completely different. He's much more, he's gentle and sort of subdued. Then you get Troughton, and then, we have what we have. But when you get to Baker, Pertwee was a little mysterious, and he was more business. But Baker is when I think it started to kind of, he became this sort of unpredictable thing again. Like he had a darkness sometimes that in his delivery, and he wasn't, I don't think he was ever quite as affectionate, even with his companions, that Pertwee was. I think Pertwee could snap, but he was much more gentle with the assistants, if you will.
I think there's always going to be the instinct to go the other way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Pertwee was this man of action, and he was, his doctor was what he was, and it was definable. So for Baker, the obvious thing was to go a little mysterious.
Well, what I loved about Baker, and it's also the part that I love about Pertwee, is that Pertwee really carried authority around with him. Like when he walked into a room and there was something wrong, you were like, okay, this is the guy who's going to point it out. He's going to dress down everybody, and then he's going to take care of it. And I love that. I mean, I love, especially one of my favorite Pertwee stories is Inferno.
Yeah, that's an awesome story.
Great.
And that thing is, for as many episodes as it is,
74
it's so
episodes.
Crazy, and yet it all holds together perfectly.
It does, yeah. Yeah.
And you get to see him dress down people in two different universes. So it's, it's lovely. But what I loved about Baker is Baker was able to, and especially as his stories progressed, you saw more and more of the ability to be crazy and wacky, almost in inappropriate situations. And then on the other side, when the authority came out, it was solid. It was there. Yeah. And you're like, oh, we better pay attention. A particular favorite Baker story of mine is the Seeds of Death.
Seeds of Doom.
Seeds of Doom. Sorry, I always get that confused with the Troughton one.
I was just going to cite that. That's one of my favorite stories. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love that one because you've got so many. Just the basic storyline has that thing element to it. Mm-hmm. But you really get to see a nice overview of every shade of the Doctor in that one.
It's also that one. That one's got a lot of what that first few seasons of Baker had, which were that body horror element. And
yes.
What was interesting about Canadian television is that you had to, they played it on public television, but there was a mandate that there had to be a discussion after. It had to be educational in some way. So when we would get an episode of like Tom Grattan's War, which was a British serial, there would be a discussion on the screenwriting process after. And Doctor Who, I've dumped on this before, but for the Pertwees, there was a real life scientist named Dr. Dater, who's still alive, and he would discuss the science of the episode.
Wow!
And then the next season, like for the Baker ones, they got this author, esteemed Canadian science fiction author named Judith Merrill, who didn't like Doctor Who. And she would call herself the Undoctor when she hosted it, and she kind of, had a bit of a chip on her shoulder. But the thing I remember is I stayed, I only had 12 channels, so
sure.
I stayed for the discussion after an episodes of Seeds of Death. I think it was the first one. And they were just going, yeah, this is just ripping off Quatermass. And, as an adult, I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't think it was completely a ripoff, but I get what they're saying is some of the same Quatermass tropes are in there. And, but I never really kind of thought it was a ripoff.
No,
but it's very similar in that construction.
But you're like, shut up, lady. You're the Undoctor. Why am I listening to you?
And also, first of all, why is that necessarily a bad thing? Right. Music does that, where rock and roll came from a previous music style, and so and I would say even before Quatermass, there were certain types of characters like that throughout movies and literature.
Oh, sure.
That you could cite. You know what I mean? It's just that's so annoying.
You just unlocked a special weird childhood memory of watching.
Yeah.
It's probably the first time of watching a YouTube video in a way. Like, these two people are like criticizing what I enjoyed.
Yeah. Unnecessary
on the show. That's weird.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the opposite of The Talking Dead, where all they do is kiss the ass of the show.
Yeah, no,
but it's funny that show, that you're right. It's got the body horror in it. It's dark. It's extremely violent. Even for Doctor Who,
villains.
That story is extremely violent. Great.
Yes.
In fact, not Scorby, I think, is the henchman, but the guy who's the flower guy that loves flowers.
The perm guy.
He's Camp Freddy from the Italian Job, from the Michael Caine Italian Job.
Yes, yeah.
That's who he was. But it's got these elements of Pertwee in it too, because Baker is a badass. He is a total badass in that story. He's punching people. He's twisting necks. He's using a gun. He's like carrying around a revolver and shit. And there's this great bit, but he's also got that. He's got the authority, but there's the thing about him with the humor and the unpredictability is he started to kind of be so aware of it and just hated the scripts, and he got Captain Wacky and then a serious bit, and when the serious bit, as opposed to before it was serious and then a wacky thing. And in Seeds of Doom, he has that great bit where they're about to put the creature onto Sarah. They're using Sarah as a guinea pig to put the creature on her arm so she will get infected.
Right.
And he's on
so they can bring it back, right?
So they can bring it back. And he's looking through the skylight down at what's happening. And he jumps through the skylight to rescue her. And I think he's holding a gun. And the bad guy says, "Oh, terrific, Doctor. What do you do for an encore?" And Tom Baker says, "I win." And he off with her, and it's one of the coolest moments he ever had in that.
So great.
It's very him, and it's also a little bit man of action that we didn't really get a lot from him by the time he sort of showed up. But yeah, it's just, I think that, the takeaway from all of this is it's very hard to. Well, I didn't say very hard. It's not that hard, but the character of the Doctor is such a great character that. It is down to interpretation, and you can do loads of stuff with it. And the mystery and the darkness and all that stuff, we loved all that. It all hit us in different weird ways, and got us to love it. And as we've seen, there are ways that it can go wrong, obviously. But it is the kind of thing that's always fun to think of the different people that could do it, what they could do with it. If you heard a name and that was wrong, you'd go, "Oh, I don't think they could pull that off."
Yeah.
Yeah,
we've all done that, and we could also argue some people that we don't think were good for the role. But let's go there. The idea I wanted to bring forward too, getting back to the movies, is this was the first Doctor Who merchandise that America ever got was for these movies.
Was it the comic book?
Well,
Didn't they do a comic book?
Hell yeah!
I used to own that, and I sold it, and I regret it because it was like
one of my favorite
things.
Yeah, I love it.
I don't know what happened to it. I probably sold it at a weak moment in college. But the other thing that I never sold, and I was happy to find, is the novel that came out in the U.S. And it's the weirdest. It's a picture of three people cowering, and they've got Dalek toys with sparklers shoved in them.
Oh my God!
I remember that.
I don't think I've seen this.
Yeah.
It's the Dalek toy. It's the Dalek that was more like a vacuform one.
Yeah, it's just a red. It barely looks like a Dalek.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that got released because of the film coming out. It's just Terry.
That would make sense. Yeah, probably.
Terry Nation's script, but I'm trying to look it up because it's in the other room, but. I think
is it the one that they ended up using in an episode I forget which one it was, where they show like a whole army of Daleks, but it's a wide shot?
No,
I think
that's
Evil of the Daleks. I think it's Evil of the Daleks, and those are those marks. Maybe they're marks.
Marks, that's it.
Yeah. Ones that they got, and they lined a bunch of them up to. But isn't that funny? Think about it. Doctor Who did the America would have been exposed to Doctor Who prior to the late 70s when Baker hit, because those movies came out at the time,
Yeah,
right?
they got a theatrical release in the United States, did they not? Like, they didn't just get sent off to television.
I think the first one did for sure.
Yeah,
I think
I thought it did too.
I honestly don't know. I don't remember them. I mean, it's the 60s and I was very young, but still, like, I don't recall them being released. I'm sure they were, because I think I remember seeing American lobby cards.
I mean, I think that was part of the notion. You know, Sabatsky and the other guy were Americans living in, and they moved to Great Britain, and they must have seen something coming. Like this thing was big, and this was going to
maybe it'll be huge over here.
Maybe we'll be able to do something with it, even though people don't know the show. We can make this what people are going to think an original thing or something. You know, I don't know. But
the only thing I can say is the only bit of information I can find is it was a box office bomb in the United States.
And then
the first.
Yeah. And then the only thing we really got, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, officially that was a tie-in since to the movie would have been the Product Enterprise remote control talking movie Daleks when they hit.
I love them.
Did they ever make? I've told you this before, Matt, but I've got these prints that Graham Humphreys did a lot of British quad movie posters in the UK and stuff. He did all the packaging for all the Product Enterprise stuff, and I became chummy with those guys when we kicked off Biff Bang Pow. I met them at the same guy that's in the video that's showing the Space 1999 stuff just now at UK. That dude, I forget his name. I feel bad, but he was super cool to me. And they did a gallery thing with Graham Humphreys, and I wrote to him and said, "Oh man, I wish I could be there for it. It looks so cool." He ended up FedExing me a stack of the limited edition prints that they had printed up for Humphreys, and they're all signed. And one of them is the Cushing, the art on the Cushing box, the Dalek, where it's a portrait of Cushing and the ships are on there and stuff.
Yeah.
Original piece. And the design of those ships in the movie.
Oh, they're awesome.
They're so cool. Did Product Enterprise make? They made the movie Daleks. Matt, you have a bunch of them, right?
Yes.
Did they make the ship? They didn't make the ship.
They didn't make a ship, but I'm trying to remember, because I keep my remote controls when I have my Daleks displayed. I've got them in a separate place, of course, because how could that go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant idea.
But I think one of the remote controls of one of those robots is shaped like the ship.
That's what I'm remembering. I remember seeing a picture of that and thinking, oh my God, they actually made a version of the ship as a remote control. I think I have it might not be a movie one. I think I might have a black and gold. It's a tall one that remote control and talks and stuff. Takes like 87 batteries, in the remote and the Dalek.
Get about an hour of play out of it and it's done.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I've got so many Daleks.
So
all over the house, everywhere.
And didn't they make the 8-inch type ones that talked, and they made a big giant one? Like, which ones do you have?
I've got from every possible scale. I've got the large Product Enterprise ones. I've got an original Dalek from the TV series. I've got a Dalek that is from the reboot series, Attack with an attack claw. Mm-hmm. And I've got Davros, and then I've got
the remote control. I have the Davros.
Yeah, the remote control one.
Yep.
And then I have two other. I've got a Davros that's a small version that's also remote control. Ooh. And then I've got there's another one I think that's Product Enterprises too, but a small, like from the TV show Davros. And so, and I've got a million different other sizes and shapes and varieties of white Daleks, black Daleks, and, Daleks where there's a great one. I think it's from I'm blanking on the name of the episode. The McCoy episode with the Daleks, and it's white and the black Daleks fighting each other.
Oh. What's that called?
Yeah,
Remember? Is it Remembrance?
Remembrance. Thank you. It's Remembrance of the Daleks. And so there's one that's a battle damaged one, where you see the symbiote coming out, and it's just I just Love that. Anytime you can see the actual creature inside is beautiful.
So are the movie ones your favorite version or favorite design of the Daleks? Are the movie ones?
You know what? I certainly right up there. I mean, I also like what they did in the reboot of updating the Daleks, the first few seasons, because I think it was a nice, like, they split the difference pretty well by modernizing it, but still
the gold ones, kind of the bronze.
Yeah, like I really do like those. I think those are great.
Did you like
when we got to Matt Smith and they started to look a little bit like Coke machines?
Okay. So did you like the one, because Matt Smith, that was the one that Mark Gatiss wrote, where they were like yellow and red and blue, and they were more like bumper car type. They were a drastic kind of redesign. They were much bigger.
I still like them. I still find them charming. Yeah. But I don't, compared to the rest of, I would say that's the weakest design.
Yeah. Brian, do you have a favorite Dalek design?
Favorite Dalek design? I do like the movie ones a lot.
Yeah, those are great. And I like the claw.
Yeah,
the claw.
The claw. Yeah, because like when you look back at like Day of the Daleks and stuff, like they're really kind of beat up.
They're really beat up. Yeah. I don't think anyone got a lick of paint since Hartnell.
And I really like the revised Day of the Daleks DVD where they've like added more than two.
They called a bunch of nerds and had them bring their homemade Dalek.
Yeah.
I guess I think the movie ones are special to me in the regard that they just looked great. I remember thinking they really looked great, and I like the touches they did in them.
We also realized
I like the white base, actually.
Yeah.
You probably, that like the first scene, I think when they show up, there's about 6 or 8 of them in the scene. And people would have been like, wow, I've never seen more than 2 or 3 of them together.
Right.
In the show, but because they put out the Evil of the Daleks, eventually they pieced it together with animation and everything. And there's that great sequence where they're just sort of coming off a conveyor, kind of like they're just like Dalek.
Right. Yeah.
Dalek.
Same one over and over again.
And they get like 2 of them, and they go through the shot, and then they come around the back of the camera and go around again, and just but they've got photo images of. I think they're like moving a photo image of like Daleks in the background that are sort of coming off a thing, and of course you can see what they're doing now, but it would have been. Yeah. It's a little
Earthshock does that too. It's the same 5 guys in Cybermen outfits just walking and walking.
Suspension of disbelief. You go. You're like, okay, I'm going to go along with it. But
I remember,
a Dalek, particular Dalek thing that I really love, and the only version I've seen of it is in a play set that they not too long ago. I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago put out, and it's a flying Dalek, but it's a flying Dalek using the hovercraft thing from the comic books.
Yeah, they did it. They did it in. They did like the 4-inch line of figures, the smaller.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, right.
Yep, they did that.
And I love that thing, even though it's a newer style of Dalek. The fact that they made the hovercraft.
That's right.
Which looks like it's right out of the comics. Just makes me happy.
I had that because they just when the merchandise was starting to, go bad, Capaldi showed up and they started making this 4-inch line of figures. They made an Ice Warrior, they made a Cyberman, a Dalek, and they made these little I remember this now. They made these little play sets that had. A big accessory and a couple of other plastic bits and a figure that came with it, whatever, and then cardboard
background or something.
Yes, and they were episode specific. And one of them was this thing that was its own thing, which was the Dalek with the ship,
an invasion of Earth.
Yeah.
But it wasn't from the episode. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the Matt Smith one with that specific scenario.
No, I don't remember. I remember. In fact, maybe it wasn't based on a show, but it made me think of the annuals with all those stories.
Right.
Yeah. Flying around in hovercrafts.
I had a Dalek annual as a kid that had Daleks murdering people on the front cover, like they were pushing them into a ditch. And, you know, it was just this weird thing. And we
So
haven't
great.
even discussed that around that time, and I can't, maybe you guys know more about it. Nation was trying to pitch a Dalek series to the U.S.
Oh my!
Have
Oh,
you guys heard of
yeah.
this?
Yes, I remember this. In
I don't know this.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember the details, but
There's
I do
an
recall
amazing
that
YouTube channel that's all about the Daleks, by the way.
Oh,
And this
wow.
guy, these guys, I'll have to try and find it and send it to you guys because
Oh, yeah.
they're deep dives into Dalek lore. Like they find out what happened to props and
Wow.
things like
Oh,
that. Like
wow.
they find out what happened to the movie Daleks, where
Oh,
they
wow.
are and
Wow.
what happened to them and these.
Do
guys,
they exist?
I can't. You know what? It's been so long since I watched it.
Okay.
But I think one does exist, and these guys have figured out that this is the one from Terry Nation's home that's in that interview we've all seen.
Right.
With,
Right.
Even though
Wicker,
it's
right?
been repainted 4 or 5 times,
Of
Right.
course.
this is what it was. But what is it? The show was supposed to be called The Destroyers, and
Destroyers.
it was a unproduced pilot episode of a spin-off series for American television. It was about Sarah Kingdom, who they had featured in the
Yeah, Jean
and-
Marsh.
and it was supposed to be
She was married to no, I'm sorry, never mind. Go ahead.
yeah, she was married to John Pertwee.
She was married. Yeah.
The whole idea was like a special security force against the Daleks.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So he was able
sounds
to,
like heaven.
He was able to take his creation away
Elsewhere.
from
Yeah.
elsewhere and make whatever he wanted. You know.
There was even a point where, I think he had the whole thing going on. Oh, you want to use the Daleks? I write it.
That's
Right.
right. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Terrence Dix always tells us stories about how, Terry Nation wanted to write another Dalek story, so he came by and he said, and he handed me the script, and I'd say, Terry, this is a fine script, but we've already done this story 4 times.
Yeah.
He
He was so wonderful because he was just out of fucks. And
He was. He totally
loved
was.
him for that. Same with Davison. Like the last interview I read with Davison, which was a couple of years ago, Davison's no longer giving a shit.
No, he's
I
beyond.
lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry. We're just talking about like Peter Davison is just
Davison-
dropped.
I saw Davison do an interview, I think after the 50th, where he was bad mouthing Tom Baker.
Oh, he basically he talks about Colin Baker, and even though he likes Colin Baker,
Yes.
he's sort of like, yeah, Colin's completely weird and paranoid.
Let it go, Colin.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're just sitting there going, wow, Colin Baker's probably not real thrilled to read this.
Right. Davison just.
Why would you even say that?
Well, I think it's the truth, but
Well, I think Baker has found a second life with the audio stuff and the Doctor being appreciated after 78 years. Finally, after what he did, and he. I think he's told versions of the story of how it happened and why he was let go, and his wife and Michael Grade and all these things, and it's just kind of seeped into everything. And I think that when it comes to it seems to me, if you've ever suffered through any of the BBC extra stuff on the DVDs where they've
I watch everything.
where they
Everything.
put Davison into these ridiculous. He did a thing for one of the I don't know if it's a DVD or that, where they took him back to the same
Good man.
house they did Black Orchid and made him put on cricket gear and bat a few balls.
yeah.
And I was like, I would have been like, you know what, guys, listen, I want to be here for the interview. I will do this. It's been 35 years. You really want me to get on camera and try to swing a cricket bat? Okay, fine. I would have.
We are
been
two different people.
Yeah.
You're getting the interview.
You brought the costume.
But Peter Davison went the whole 9 yards. He went above and beyond the call.
He's a team player.
Team player. And when you think of that guy who has always been there, suddenly going, oh, you know what, this Tom Baker thing, he pulled some bullshit.
Now, Tom Baker or Colin Baker?
I remember I'm thinking of the one where he was saying, after all these years, Tom Baker is still talking out of both sides of his mouth as far as like, oh yeah, I'll be there. We'll do that event or whatever. Yes, well, and then Davison was like, look, the only way we're doing it is if we all come out together. That's how it's going to be.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on in the
And there
80s.
was some shit, and then Baker, and at the last minute, Tom Baker's like, well, I'd like to be announced lost.
Yeah.
And so he gets all the applause. And Davison's going, I don't care. I don't have an ego that way. But you know what? Enough is enough. He pulled that.
Right. No, I can see how that
30 years ago, and da-da-da-da-da, you know. So and then Terrence Dix, of course, once they sat him down, he just was like that spin that top that you just start spinning. And he would just, all the stories came out about, you know, Terry Nation and, you know, Bob, you know, and I could just listen to him forever.
I could, I could just eat.
Me too, yeah. No, I love him.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
We did a tribute episode to him, did we not?
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
we did. He was in the Terry Nation, he had in the script, and I'd say, well, Terry, this is a very good script, but you've already given me this script 14 times already.
Yeah.
This is a one-man show.
Yeah.
Even if it has to be a one-man audience, I am there. I will pay for 2 tickets if you do this.
I will do this.
We got to think of it.
A great title riffing on dicks. It has to be something riffing on dicks. You know, don't
Dick
give
pics.
2 dicks or something, or 2 dicks. You know, one man. I don't know. Would have to be something to do with dicks, and I'll happily do a one-man show. And
and if you just do it, but inexplicably in the nude.
Yeah. Yeah, never addressing the nudity.
No, never address it.
Listen.
Actually, you know what? Just with a blazer and a turtleneck and nothing else.
Nothing else.
Wow. You've just described what I'm wearing right now.
Oh.
Yeah, and a long snake-like prosthetic cock.
Oh.
I think we can do this. I think when quarantine is done, there are going to be a lot of small theaters around town that are going to be hungry for stuff like this.
I am right now sculpting the cock.
Yeah. I am loading some. I am getting some vegetables ready.
And all we have to do is take things that he's already said in print or in the interviews and just riff off them because it's brilliant.
Well, I think what we could do also is we would plant people in the audience, and after every line, you just have people applaud. Right?
And then for some reason ask me to autograph their Target Doctor Who books afterwards.
Yes, of course.
Completely convinced.
And what if you at a certain point in the show you write in your diary, right? But the diary, there's a voiceover, and you have a completely different posh English voice.
Yes,
I can do this. Yes. So the thing that he's doing is just affected. He always spoke that way, even in vintage footage. But at home, he was very posh.
Yeah, he sounds.
It's either that, or this is how he thinks he sounds in his head.
I love this.
Going
this
places
is getting
here.
Really, we got to do
I say
that.
we stay up all night and finish this.
Let's do it.
Let's bang
Let's
it out.
do it.
The other thing I wanted to mention about this movie was the promotional single that was released by Roberta Tovey.
Roberta Tovey, yeah. I've got it on my iShuffle.
Do you really?
I do.
Who's who?
Yep.
Your quarantine mix?
Oh, and the other thing is that it does not use the Ron Grainer Doctor Who theme, but it uses a theme that's like an earworm for me. Like that, I hadn't seen.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing, but for years that would come in my head, and I go, what is that from? And then I think when the films came out on VHS in the 90s, I picked them up. And I was like, oh, that's where it's from. Like, it's from these Doctor Who movies. Because I have an in-and-out relationship with them. I haven't watched them in a very long time.
The music is really groovy.
Yeah,
it really is.
Really funky. And to be honest,
jazzy and
when
fun.
I was like 10 and I saw the one of the, I thought the TARDIS interior was neat. Now I look at it and it's like, wow, that's really a phoned-in set. But
it's a card table and some and a microscope, and
it has absolutely no, like, there's no real control unit. There's no.
Well, they changed it for the second film. The second film is a little more. It's a little sexier, but not much.
Not
the
much.
first one just looks like, the back room at a hardware store or something, with just wires everywhere and boxes.
Yeah.
Well, it reminded me a lot of the blackout set. It was an Irwin Allen tradition. Every time they went into a spaceship or something, it would just be a blackout set with some computers.
Right.
So I was kind of used to it, but yeah.
See, funny you say that. I always think, when I think of that trope, I think that's usually like one of those episodes where the lead character's in a coma and he's sort of in his mind throughout the episode.
Yeah.
And a computer console.
Good call.
And everything else is black. And they must have reached a point in budgeting the show where they went, look, we're spending way too much money. We're going to need at least 2 or 3 episodes where somebody's in someone's mind, or it's a dream, or something, because we don't have enough props and we can't keep building this shit. So figure it out. And then half the episode is that character talking to, a head or something that's just in a jar that's telling him they're in, a coma or something.
But there's an episode of The Highwaymen where with your guy Sam Jones in it.
Sam Jones?
Where they kidnap them and put them on a machine, and they use old clips, like it's like a virtual reality machine, and they use clips from other episodes and piece together like this narrative.
It's the classic clip episode.
It's the weirdest clip show I think I've ever seen.
They're all on a couch.
Yeah, they're all just, they're on the
Christmas.
couch with diodes on their heads,
Everybody did that. Star Trek did it. Space 1999. I saw that one recently where
Star Trek.
Landau's in a coma or something, and he's wearing like a karate gi almost, or like a robe throughout, and it's not real, but he figures, there's a way to change it and stuff, and everybody did that. Every show seemed to do that.
With Star Trek, because I believe you're talking about the Menagerie, which was part 1 and 2, and it was comprised of the pilot, the cage, right? Well, and then they filmed all this wraparound stuff. And you know that one of the reasons they did that was because they didn't have enough episodes.
Yeah, that's right.
So they used that, and they got 2 episodes out of that, which I think is actually pretty brilliant.
I think
because
it's great.
It's brilliant.
It works really well.
Yeah.
Again, talk about a guy who had the sun shining on him, Roddenberry. Like, he also got to make 2 pilots.
Yeah.
Who gets to make a pilot?
To do that.
Go, here's a bunch more money. Do it again, but do it different. Here's a bunch of money to do it. Instead of, you failed, we're not putting this show on the air. Like, that's extraordinary. But didn't they also do one where like the Enterprise is empty?
Oh yeah.
It's just Kirk and then some
That's a
some
third
chick,
season gutbuster.
some chick and it's
That's one where I think the rest of the planet is actually overpopulated. But he's alone on the ship, and what they've done, if I remember the episode correctly, they've created a duplicate, like a set of the ship.
Yeah.
Because he looks at the view screen and there's all these faces looking at him. Yeah. And those are the real people on the planet. I forget what the episode's called, but
I can't remember. I think it's called Mark of the Gideon, and I remember it because it's one of the I remember going through all the Star Trek episodes when I was 11 on television. And that was the one that was like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
And then I bought, and then I don't really like the Empath. I think it's called the Empath. There's a few third season episodes that are painful. And I got, when I was like 11 or 12, I got a vintage Panini sticker book from Germany. And it had all the stickers, I had to put all the stickers in it. And I just remember, I don't remember where I got it. I think I got it at the exhibition, but I remember it was full of third season episodes, and I'm putting the sticker of that Mark of the Gideon episode in, going, ugh. But
that is a specific memory. That is very.
It's just came lodged out of my brain. I was just also wanted to point out one of the funniest things about the Doctor Who and the Daleks movie is the scene where the Daleks are making Roberta Tovey write a note to the Thals.
Yes.
And on their desk is just 3 lava lamps. Like,
Oh yeah, no, that was the future.
yeah, and
But I remember
in Amazon Women on the Moon, they're talking to the president, and the president just has I think it's Forrest Ackerman, and he's got a lava lamp on his desk.
You know what took the place of that was the plasma ball.
Oh yeah, the Spencer Gift plasma ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember
that became the latest.
I cringed at that every time I watched Star Trek Voyager.
I had other reasons to cringe.
Yeah, well, no, I did, so did I, but that one drove me crazy.
Watched multiple episodes might be the first problem with that Voyager statement. But I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't hate Star Trek. Everybody just Voyager's fine. But they when the Thals show up, I remember when I did rewatch it years back, it was like, wow, this is like the first guy shows up and he's almost like a lead singer in a glam band from 71, 72.
I was just going to say, don't get strong out. By the way I look.
He's wearing a cape. Isn't he wearing a cape?
Yes, he is.
He's got like a glitter cape and like he's practically shirtless. He's got massive purple eyeshadow and it's not long hair, but it's not quite beetle cut, but it's a little shaggy. And you're like, wow, this is kind of kooky for 66. Like, yeah, I know what they're going for here, but it's he was like glam before glam hit, kind of. I thought that because he sees her and gives her the note or something, or she gives him. Well,
he chases Roberta Tovey because she's going to deliver the note, and then he's chasing her, but she thinks that he's like some sort of monster because he's in like this fur coat
or a pedo, because he's wearing a cape and
right, yeah. And there's this trail of candy that's leading into a van, a space van.
He's got a white van parked outside.
Yeah. Always the trademark white van.
There's some cyborg puppies in a Dalek basket.
You just brought up Monster, and that is one of the scenes in the film that haunted me as a kid. Is the Dalek's hand looks so cool.
It was yes. That's another thing that stuck with me too, because when I was a kid, just by looking at the Daleks, you think, oh, they're robots.
Yeah.
Like it really hammered home what they were when the hand comes out. And I'm like, oh my god, this is even better than I thought.
Yeah, I don't remember that. That's in the first movie?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I don't remember that.
Because they get into the Dalek. One of them gets into the Dalek and acts. And sometimes I get the scenes between the two movies juxtaposed.
It's cheap laughs there. He gets into the Dalek.
His voice sounds like a Dalek, but it's Roy Castle.
Roy Castle, yeah.
But was that the first time? Because at that point I don't even know when I understood. When the first time I saw Genesis, maybe even the second time, I don't know. There's that bit where Baker's going to go blow stuff up.
Yeah. And
he has that mutant around his neck, and he does this amazing job of making it seem like it's strangling him when he comes out of the thing. But I was scared the crap out of me. But I didn't make the connection that was inside the Dalek. I don't know when I understood that there was this living thing. You mentioned Earthshock.
You thought it was happening right there in space.
Well, but I mean, remember Earthshock where they're wearing moon boots. The Cybermen are wearing moon boots. And I mean, I was a kid, but I was, smart enough to know this was not an expensively made show. I understood that even, in 81 or 82, whatever. And in Earthshock, you could see the chin, the mouth of the actor behind the...
Yeah.
They had that clear... And I remember watching it the first time going, oh, this looks really bad. Like, this is bad. They're supposed to be...
Or is it on purpose?
They're robots. Why? We can see the guy, but didn't they know that if they made a clear chin that you'd be able to see the guy? So I don't even know if I understood that's what the Cybermen were like humans that had been made into something else. I thought they were robots in 81 or so. So I don't know when I knew that things were inside Daleks.
Yeah. Hey, I know can I share one of my most treasured Dalek movie collectibles?
Yes.
I wish you would.
I collect 16 millimeter films.
Uh-huh.
I have Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD on 16.
No kidding.
In amazing shape.
Wow. Have you ever been able to? Do you have a projector?
Oh yeah. No, I have a projector. I have all kinds of stuff. I mean, I have hundreds of films. Do you?
I have a projector.
And I also have At the Earth's Core, by the way, too.
No kidding. Oh.
Yeah.
See, that's the dream for me. I own
on
two things on 16 millimeter. I own a Battle of the Planets episode and an episode of Planet of the Apes. And
oh, nice.
I bought a projector, but I don't know how to use the darn thing. And
it'll take a second to figure it out.
This one's really, really, it's challenging me.
Matt, you have hundreds of 16 millimeter movies?
Hundreds.
Where on God's green earth in that house would you put them? Where are they?
I have a whole closet that is the film library. That's they've stacked on top of each other, and I've got them on these like rolling racks where you can pull them out and get to the other ones. And I've got I've got so many things. I also have Battle of the Planets and Astro Boy and Gigantor and one of the edited those Planet of the Apes movies they made from the TV shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I've got Life, Liberty, and Pursuit on the Planet of the Apes.
That one will always remind me of City TV because they used to play those in Toronto on City TV, and they had this announcer, and this guy's named Mark Daly, and he's a legend here. And I can remember watching at like 2 a.m, Life, Liberty, and Pursuit of the Planet of the Apes, and he just went, and now the next feature, Life, Liberty, Planet of the Apes. And it was the funniest thing because there's 3 people watching right now.
Yeah.
And
I've got all kinds of stuff.
Oh, that's so cool.
The way you talk about these 16 millimeter movies, sure would be fun to come over and watch some of them, but unfortunately, we're in the middle of a.
Well, you know what? I don't know if we're at this place yet because I want to do everything that California tells me to because they've been actually doing an amazing job.
They have. They absolutely
social distancing and so forth. But at some point, what we normally do is we play them out in the courtyard in our house. You know that courtyard?
Yeah.
And so I would think that there might be a way, because you can even come in through a separate entrance through the yard where you could sit and watch these things and have some social distancing.
What people don't know is I do have my own special interest when I come over to Matt's house. It's
sort of a vacuum tube.
Yeah, it's sort of like the back door at the club when you can come in, you don't have to wait in line. Kind of
I don't know how many times we shot a Goodfellas take of you coming in the back.
That's exactly what it is, without the date. But that's a great idea. And if you do that and you get that off the ground, I give you my solemn vow in the episode right now. I will be there. I will.
Okay, maybe I will. Maybe I can plan that. I don't think that's going against any health guidelines if we do it correctly. But
I don't think so. I'm good, and I'm
You know what I got for my birthday?
What'd you get
for my birthday? I got 16 millimeter print of The Sixth Finger from Outer Limits.
Wow! Holy, David McCallum, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that David?
Yeah, that's right.
Nice.
And I have a bunch of those on 16.
It all comes back to Robert Vaughn.
Awesome.
It eventually all comes back to Robert Vaughn.
That's right.
Isn't everything?
But seeing as we set out to do an episode about Robert Vaughn tonight.
Hey,
you got about 4 episodes, I think, on this one.
I don't know how to edit those into a coherent pattern, but I think anyone who listens to us knows that, and
just let it go.
We'll be fine.
Yeah. And you know what? And if we ever do a McCallum episode, it's only going to be about.
Maybe we should title this episode
recording
Mystery Box.
Yeah.
Dalek grab bag.
Maybe mystery treasure box. Because it is a treasure.
It is. No, you guys are a treasure.
Let's not undersell it. But come on, this is great. This is great podcasting, right? Good stuff. Yeah. So wow, who I told you he'd be all right, Brian.
I didn't doubt you, sir.
And I'm new fan. I'm like a new fan now, I'm new fan. If I want to speak like a caveman, new fan.
New fan. It's
what's
funny
fun
you
about
speak like a caveman and talk about a podcast.
What's fun about this
for Box said words,
Matt, is you normally doing a podcast with 3 other people and or a 5th chair.
That's right. My podcast mates are James Gonis, Sean Sheridan, and Larry Stroth, and then we'll have a guest, somebody like you or others.
That's right. And
so I would like to say that you guys do a great job of not stomping over each other.
We try.
Yeah,
we try. We don't always succeed.
They're in a room. They're in a room together, though.
That's probably really helpful.
It has been harder doing it through Zoom.
Oh yeah.
Just because there's a little bit of that delay sometimes, and so it can be a little tricky. But we're doing the best we can.
You guys are great. Is this the longest you've been able to talk about stuff that you dig just on your own without having 3 other people to?
Oh, it's such like a weight lifted off my shoulder.
You've been dying to talk about this stuff.
You can trash those guys here. We won't tell anyone.
I can finally get a Doctor Who word in edgewise.
Oh, okay.
They're not the biggest Doctor Who guys. Sean likes Doctor Who, but the other two not so much.
Funny.
Yeah, and they're kind of bigger Star Wars guys than you, right? Aren't they
That's
bigger?
Correct. Yes.
Star Wars, yeah. No, they're a great bunch of guys. It's a great show. I'm honored to have been on it, and I can't wait to do it again because
you can find it wherever good podcasts are found on all the platforms.
Monster Party Podcast.
Yes.
Yes, it's wonderful.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for doing this, man. I'm so glad you could do it, and it's been an absolute blast. This has been great.
Likewise.
This has been tremendous. I've really enjoyed myself.
I think I love you too.
Take your time. Take your time.
Okay. I you know what? I fall quickly and easily.
He does. That's true. I'm not going to lie.
That's all
true.
right. Every day is a new adventure.
Oh, that's for sure.
This is great. I can't wait to hear it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
All right.
Have
See you next time.
See ya.
Speak
Thanks,
soon.
everybody.